Welcome, my friends, to the Paranormal M channel. Having trouble sleeping again? Let me help you out. This is my favorite thing to do, sharing paranormal experiences from all around the world. It's honestly so fascinating. So don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest videos on this channel. And feel free to send us your own paranormal experiences too. Now, get in bed, pull up your blanket, and let's dive into tonight's stories. You know, whenever I think about Bangkok, I don't just picture traffic and malls. I think about the canals, the old wooden houses, and a woman named Mae Nok. Have you heard of her? Let me tell you her story. A long time ago, when Bangkok was still crisscrossed by quiet, shadowy waterways, and people traveled more by boat than by car, there lived a young couple by the Phra Khanong Canal. The wife's name was Nok, and her husband was called Phra. They weren't rich or important, just two ordinary people. Their little wooden house sat on stilts above the water, the kind of place where you'd wake up to the sound of roosters and the creak of boats passing by. Nok was pregnant, and Phra used to rest his hand on her belly and promise he'd build her a bigger house one day. But life had other plans. One year, Phra was drafted into the army. There was a conflict far away, and like many men of that time, he had no choice but to go. On the day he left, Nok walked with him all the way to the pier. She tried to be brave, smiling and teasing him, but her eyes were already wet. Phra promised her, "I'll come back to you, to both of you," and gently touched her round stomach before he stepped onto the boat. While Phra was away, Nok went into labor. Back then, childbirth was dangerous. There were no modern hospitals, no machines, just midwives, prayers, and luck. Nok's luck ran out. She and the baby died during childbirth. The villagers mourned quietly. They held the funeral, chanted prayers, and did everything they could to help her spirit move on. But love, especially the kind that can't accept goodbye, can cling to this world in strange ways. Phra knew nothing. Far away, he fought, he trained, he dreamed of coming home to a wife and child he had never met. Months later, when the war finally eased and he was released, he hurried back to Phra Khanong. The canal looked the same, the air heavy with humidity and the smell of cooked rice and river water. As he approached his house at dusk, he saw a light glowing inside. And there, at the doorway, was Nok. She stood cradling a baby in her arms, smiling through tears. "Phra, you're home," she said. Imagine his relief. He thought, "I survived. I came back. My family is alive." He didn't know, he couldn't know, that both his wife and child had already been buried. From that night on, they lived as if nothing had happened. Nok cooked his favorite dishes. The baby cooed and fussed. At night, Phra lay down beside his wife, listening to the sound of the canal and the soft breathing of the child, thinking he was the luckiest man alive. But the village knew the truth. They had seen Nok's funeral. They had watched the cremation smoke drift into the sky. Some tried to warn him. An old neighbor would stop Phra on the path and say, "You should come stay at the temple for a while." Phra just laughed it off. "Why? My wife and child are waiting for me," he'd say. The neighbor could only shake his head. How do you tell a man that the woman he sleeps beside is no longer among the living? One evening, the truth slipped out in a way no one could ignore. Phra looked up to tell her he'd bring it back, but before he could move, he saw a pale hand reach down through the floorboards. The arm stretched, and stretched, and stretched far beyond what any human arm could. The hand calmly picked up the pestle from the ground and slid back up into the house, the arm shrinking to normal length as if nothing strange had happened. In that moment, every hair on Phra's body stood on end. All the warnings, all the strange looks from the villagers, all the hushed whispers finally made sense. His mind screamed at him to deny it, to pretend he hadn't seen. But there was no escaping it now. The woman he loved was no longer alive. Terrified and heartbroken, Claude did the only thing he knew to do. He ran. He fled in the middle of the night, leaving the house, the canal, the memories, everything. Nok's voice echoed after him, pleading, calling his name, carrying over the water like a sorrowful wind. But there's one place spirits are believed to have no power: the temple. Claude reached the nearest temple, threw himself inside the grounds, and begged the monks to help him. The monks, already aware of the restless spirit haunting Phra Khanong, began to chant. Nok's ghost hovered at the edge of the temple boundary, unable to cross, clutching her baby. In that image, people say, you could see everything at once: love, grief, anger, and the unbearable pain of being left behind. What happened next depends on who's telling the story. Some say a powerful monk compassionately bound her spirit inside a clay pot, sealing it and dropping it into the canal so she could do no more harm. Others say he spoke gently to her, guiding her to understand that forcing Claude to stay with her was only deepening both their suffering, and eventually she let go and moved on peacefully. And then there are those who whisper that on quiet nights, when the moon is reflected in the dark water of the canal, a woman holding a baby can still be seen by the old houses, waiting. Over time, people began calling her Mae Nok Phra Khanong, Mother Nok of Phra Khanong. She stopped being just a ghost story. She became a symbol. On one hand, Mae Nok represents a love so strong that not even death could bear to separate it. She loved her husband fiercely, with all the devotion of a young wife who had every dream stolen from her too soon. On the other hand, her story is a gentle warning. It reminds us how hard it is to accept loss, how easy it is to cling to what can't come back, and how that clinging can turn something pure into something painful, even frightening. It's about grief, denial, and the moment we must finally say, I have to let go, even when our heart refuses. If you ever find yourself in Bangkok, you can visit the place that's become her spiritual home, Wat Mahabut, in the On Nut area. Inside the temple grounds, there's a shrine dedicated to Mae Nok, or Mae Nok, as some people still call her in their own family versions of the tale. There, you'll see a statue of a young woman holding her baby, surrounded by offerings: tiny baby clothes, toys, flowers, even beautiful dresses and silk scarves. People bring these gifts not out of fear, but out of respect and affection. Locals visit her shrine to pray for many things: for safe and healthy pregnancies, for protection from being drafted into the military. They talk to her like an older sister, or a friend who understands heartbreak a little too well. What makes her story last through centuries, films, books, and TV shows, isn't just the ghostly part. It's that deep human longing underneath it all. That wish we've all had, at least once, for love to ignore every rule of life and death. So when you hear the name Mae Nok Phra Khanong, I don't want you to think only of a scary ghost from an old Thai legend. I want you to remember a young woman who loved so fiercely that she didn't know how to say goodbye. And maybe, in her story, you'll recognize a piece of your own heart too. So let me take you back a bit and set the scene. I grew up in this quiet suburb just outside a big city. The neighborhood itself used to be Native American land, and there was still a small, old cemetery tucked behind a little line of trees at the edge of our subdivision. You could see the gravestones if you stood on the hill behind the park and really looked. My family moved into our house in 2004, before it was even finished being built, and we stayed there until 2023. So basically, that house is my whole childhood and most of my adulthood. From as far back as I can remember, there was something in that house. it wasn't just me. It was my whole immediate family. My mom, Elena, my dad, Mark, and my younger sister, Lily. We all had these similar experiences, even before we ever compared notes. That's what made it so unsettling later, realizing how much of it overlapped. The most common thing we all saw was this shadow. It would come down the staircase and into the living room, or linger by the hallway that led to the laundry room and the door to the garage, right next to my parents' bedroom. That spot and the stairs were the hot spots. It happened so often that it kind of became part of the house, like, oh yeah, there's the shadow again, almost like another family member who never spoke. What really validated everything for us, though, was our extended family. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, they'd come over for holidays or birthdays, and after a while, on completely separate occasions, they'd say things like, "I swear I just saw someone coming down your stairs, but when I looked, no one was there." Or, "I thought one of you was standing by the hallway, but then the figure just wasn't." We never prompted them. We never asked, "Hey, do you see anything weird here?" They just volunteered this stuff on their own. And it was always the same areas: the staircase, that hallway near the laundry and garage. The presence never really felt good or bad. It was just there, neutral, existing alongside us. To me, it always felt a bit masculine, though I never saw an actual face or details. It was always a dark shape, seen from the corner of my eye, that would vanish the second I turned my head. And just to make it weirder, we were the first family to ever live in that house. We bought the lot before they started building and moved in as some of the first people in the whole neighborhood. No previous owners, no tragic history tied to that specific home as far as we knew. Because of that, I always assumed whatever it was had more to do with the land than the house itself. It felt like residual energy, something left over, replaying the same routes, down the stairs, by the hallway, then gone. It never really interacted with us. It just appeared and disappeared. Until one morning. This was in 2021. It was a weekday, sometime around 6:30 in the morning. The house was quiet in that specific way early mornings are, kind of bluish, kind of still. My parents had already left for work. My sister Lily was still asleep in her room down the hall. So as far as I knew, I was the only one awake. My bathroom and bedroom were right next to each other. When you stepped out of the bathroom, you'd take a sharp left and you'd be standing right in my bedroom doorway. That morning, I finished brushing my teeth, opened the bathroom door, and as I stepped out and turned left, I saw it. This big, solid black shadow right at the edge of my doorway. Not a smudge, not a trick of the light. It had shape to it. It was just there for a second, like it had been waiting. But this time, I looked toward it and said, out loud, in this kind of calm voice, "I see you." And then I walked into my room like that was the most normal thing in the world. I got dressed, gathered my stuff for work, and headed downstairs. Our kitchen had this open layout where you could see the stairs through the gap between the counter and the bar stools. I was standing there, about to grab my keys, when I saw it again. The same black shadow, moving down the stairs, crossing behind the bar. Like it was headed straight into the kitchen with me. It didn't rush. It just moved, like it was walking. I looked right where it was and said again, "I see you." And then again, I just continued with my morning. I grabbed my keys and left for work. I didn't really process how weird it was until later. At that point, it was just this eerie, okay, that was new, kind of feeling. About 2 hours after I got to work, my phone buzzed. It was Lily. She texted me, "Hey, can you lock the front door? I'm leaving." I stared at my phone for a second, confused. I wrote back, "I'm not home. I've been at work for like 2 hours." A minute later, she replied, and you could practically feel the anxiety through the text. "You're not in your room?" I told her no, I'd left around 7 a.m. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. She told me she'd been hearing me in my room. Now, you have to understand something. At the time, I had this old desk chair in my room that squeaked and creaked with every tiny movement. You couldn't sit in it without it announcing itself. Everyone in the house knew that sound. Lily said she'd been lying in bed, half awake, and could clearly hear my chair moving. Not just once, the kind of subtle, repetitive creaking that happens when someone's shifting around, leaning back, turning, fidgeting while they're sitting. She said she thought I'd stayed home and was just at my desk, maybe on my computer or getting ready. That's why she texted to ask me to lock the door. She assumed I was upstairs. That was the moment everything clicked for me. The very same morning I finally acknowledged this thing, told it, "I see you," not once, but twice. It apparently decided to go into my room and sit in my chair. No one else was home. I'd been gone for hours, and yet my sister heard that unmistakable sound of someone in my desk chair, moving around. When I told her what I'd seen that morning, and shadow at my bedroom door, the shadow coming down the stairs, she freaked out. And honestly, so did I. Because what are the odds? All those years of it just quietly existing in its usual spots, never doing much of anything, and the one time I speak directly to it, it suddenly gets bolder. It doesn't just show itself, it behaves like it's me, in my room, in my chair. Nothing like that has happened since. No full-on, someone sitting in the chair type of thing. After that, it went back to the usual. Faint shadows at the edge of vision, the occasional sound of footsteps or the floor creaking upstairs when everyone's downstairs. But I know it's still there. Every now and then, if I visited my parents before they moved, I'd catch a glimpse of something by the stairs, or feel that familiar awareness, like you're not alone, even when no one else is in the room. Do I know what it is? No. Do I know why it chose that particular morning to make its presence so undeniable? Also no. All I know is that, for one day, it went from being this quiet, background presence to something that answered back in its own way. And even now, when I think about that house, the staircase, the hallway, my old desk chair, I just hope that whatever it is means well, and that, in its own strange way, it was just trying to say, "I see you too." So, let me tell you about the house I grew up in. From the outside, it looked totally normal, just a slightly run-down little place at the edge of town. But inside, it was pretty haunted. And I don't mean like movie-level stuff flying around the room. It was more subtle, creepy, but subtle. It started with the animals. Our dog Milo would just sit in the hallway and growl at empty corners, or he'd bark and chase something that wasn't there. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I'd see these little shadowy cats slip into a room, tails flicking, and when I'd flip the light on, nothing. No cat, no movement, just the feeling that something had been there a second before. Then there were the black shapes, little blobs almost, that would shoot across a room or curve around the overhead light, like they were trying not to be seen. I saw those more than once, enough that I just kind of got used to them, like, oh, okay, that again. But the worst thing, the thing I still think about, was the flashing blue light. The first time I saw it, I was maybe 9. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, and I could see this blue flickering in the hallway through the crack under my door. It looked exactly like when someone's watching TV in the dark. You know that glow? Soft but kind of in your face? That. I got annoyed. I thought my older brother, let's call him Ethan, had left his bedroom door open and was blasting TV with the lights off. So I finally huffed, rolled out of bed, and stomped into the hallway to tell him to turn it down. The second I stepped out, my whole vision just exploded in white, like someone took a photo 2 inches from my face. The blue flickering stopped instantly. When my eyes adjusted, I saw Ethan's door was actually shut. His light was on, and when I knocked and went in, he was watching TV, but with the door closed the whole time. There was no way that glow I'd seen was coming from his room. That was the first time, but not the last. As the years went on, probably from around age 7 to 12, I saw that blue light a lot, almost every night for a while. I'd be lying in bed and it would start up again, like that same TV in a dark house glow. It would brighten, dim, like it was pacing the hallway. Sometimes it would pause right near my door, and I'd feel it more than see it. This pressure in the air, like the room was holding its breath. Every once in a while, I'd see an orange light too. That one usually appeared at the far end of the hallway, just a warm, steady glow, almost like someone holding a lantern. I only remember seeing it a few times, maybe 3 or 4, but it felt different. When I saw the orange light, I didn't feel scared or annoyed. I actually felt calmer. I used to wonder if blue was one thing and orange was another. Like maybe the orange one was kinder, protective even. The worst night was the one where the blue light didn't stay in the hallway. I woke up in the middle of the night, and my room was pulsing with that same cold blue glow, only stronger than ever, like it had finally come inside instead of just hanging around outside my door. It felt close, too close. I remember lying on my back, absolutely rigid, and feeling this tight pressure clamp around my wrists, like someone was holding them down. There was this loud, heavy banging on the walls, like fists hitting drywall, over and over. I wanted to scream, but nothing would come out. I just lay there, tense and terrified, and then, at some point, it stopped. The banging faded, the pressure eased, the blue light dimmed away, and somehow, no idea how, I fell back asleep. It wasn't just inside the house either. One night we were driving near this old stretch of land outside town. Lots of historic ranches out that way. It was late and we were all in the car. My mom, who I'll call Sandra, my brother Ethan, and me in the back seat. The road was pretty empty. Then, out of nowhere, this glowing, 4-legged shape sprinted across the road in front of us. It looked like a horse, but not quite right. Too thin in some places, too bright around the edges, almost like someone had traced it in light. My mom hit the brakes, and I watched the car in front of us slam on their brakes too, so I know we weren't the only ones who saw it. Nobody crashed. The thing just ran across and disappeared into the dark field. We all kind of sat there in silence for a second and then started talking over each other. "Did you see that? What was that?" It wasn't headlights. It wasn't a reflection. It was its own thing. Back at the house, everything just kept building. The lights, the shapes, the weird heaviness in certain rooms. And on top of all that, there was a lot of negativity in that place. Before my mom bought the house, the previous owner had been really paranoid. Like, always checking the windows and peeking through the blinds paranoid. We later heard that he died not long after the house changed hands. While we lived there, my mom went through 2 divorces. There were alcoholic boyfriends, screaming matches in the kitchen, broken bottles, slammed doors. Money was always tight. The kind of tight where you count coins at the gas station and hope it's enough. Several pets died while we lived there, and my mom buried them in the backyard because we couldn't afford anything else. The yard started to feel like a graveyard in more ways than one. It was just heavy. The house felt soaked in stress and sadness and fear. Eventually, things got bad enough that my mom lost the house to foreclosure. We had a few weeks between us moving out and the bank officially taking it over. During that weird in-between time, my mom went back and forth a bit, grabbing old mail, clearing out whatever we'd forgotten. One day, a family friend, let's call her Marla, stopped by the old place to pick something up for my mom. Later, she told us that when she pulled into the driveway, she could see this bluish glow coming from the garage windows. Her first thought was that maybe a homeless person had broken in and set up a little camp with a TV and a generator or something, because it just looked exactly like someone watching television inside a dark space. She got freaked out and left pretty quickly. Not long after that, my mom went by the house with me in the car. We parked out front to check the mail and take out some trash that was still there. As we were tossing bags into the bin, one of them ripped, spilling stuff everywhere. My mom muttered something under her breath, told me to hang on, and ran inside to grab a new bag. A minute or two later, she came back out fast. Like, really fast. She slammed the front door, hurried to the car, threw the new bag into the trash almost as an afterthought, and told me, "We're leaving. Now." She was shaken. I could hear it in her voice. Later that night, when she'd calmed down a little, she finally told me what she'd seen. She'd stepped into the house and immediately noticed that same blue, flickering light coming from the garage, just like Marla described. Same ghost TV effect, same pulsing glow. There was no power hooked up, no TV, nobody in there. Just that light. That was the moment she admitted to me that she'd seen it before, back when we still lived there. She just never wanted to scare me, so she pretended it wasn't happening. The weird part is, I've never experienced anything like that again. I've gone on ghost tours. I've visited places that are supposed to be super haunted. One of them was an old mining town, really well known for its ghost stories. I've been in creaky hotels, historic cemeteries, all the classic haunted spots. And nothing. No blue light, no orange light, no pacing glow in the hall. Just the occasional chilly feeling or overactive imagination. Sometimes I wonder if that house was just a hot spot. Like all the fear and anger and grief soaked into the walls and turned the place into a magnet for whatever was out there. I think about the paranoid previous owner, the divorces, the buried pets, the alcoholic boyfriends, the stress of being a single mom barely hanging on, and I wonder if all of that fed into it. I still don't really know what I saw. I just know I didn't imagine it. It's been years, and it still sits in the back of my mind, bothering me in this quiet way. So if you've ever had anything like that, those weird TV-style lights, the blue or orange glow, anything pacing the halls at night, I'd genuinely love to hear about it. Even just knowing someone else has seen something similar would make me feel a little less alone, and a little less like that house followed me in my memories, still flickering at the edge of the dark. Alright, so let me tell you about this one really strange trip we took. It was me, my wife Emma, and our little girl, Lily. We rented this newer cabin in West Virginia, up in the mountains near Canaan Valley and another state park with these huge, beautiful waterfalls. On paper, it was perfect. Fresh wood, big windows, hot tub on the deck, all that good stuff. But the second we walked in, something just felt off. I don't usually jump to haunted or anything like that. The only other time I'd felt weird about a place was when I was a teenager and my dad, Frank, remodeled this old house. My brother Josh and I would hear things, footsteps, creaks, whispers. And I just figured, old house, overactive imagination. Funny thing is, when we moved after that into a 150-year-old farmhouse, I slept like a baby for the first time in years. Since then, nothing. No weird vibes, no spooky stories. Until this cabin. So, first thing that happened, as soon as we got there, I was exhausted. I mean, I've stayed in probably a couple dozen cabins all over the Appalachians, and usually I'm bouncing off the walls when we arrive. I'm that person who's like, let's unpack, make a fire, go for a quick hike before sunset. But this time, I walked into the bedroom, kicked off my shoes, and just face planted on the bed. I was out. Next thing I know, Emma and Lily are gently waking me up, and 2 hours have passed. Middle of the afternoon, on vacation. I never nap, and definitely not on day one. The second thing happened that evening when I went out to set up the hot tub. It was dark by then, and the cabin had these little motion-activated lights along the outdoor steps. They weren't big floodlights, just small ones on each stair so you can see where you're walking. I'm out there fiddling with the cover on the hot tub, and I suddenly get that feeling, like someone's standing just behind you, watching. You know that prickly feeling on the back of your neck? That. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the stair lights start flicking on. One step, then the next, then the next. Like something is walking slowly down the stairs toward me. Each light had its own sensor, and they were going in order, like footsteps. So I stop what I'm doing and turn around. Nothing. No person, no animal. I stand there a bit longer, and the lights just stop. Later, when Emma went out there alone, the lights never did that for her. It only happened when I was outside by myself. All week, I felt drained. Normally on trips like this, I'm the first one up, out the door by 5:30 in the morning for a solo hike, coffee in hand, ready to go. But at this cabin, I was the first one to bed and the last one to wake up, every single day. And during the day, I kept wanting to nap, which again is just not me. I'm usually a pretty upbeat, cheerful guy, and instead, I felt heavy. Almost low-level depressed for no clear reason. When we finally packed up and drove away at the end of the week, I swear I felt this subtle lift, like someone had slowly turned the dimmer switch back up on my mood. Then there were the sounds. We had a baby monitor set up in Lily's room. It was one of those video monitors, mounted high enough that she couldn't reach it. A few times at night, I'd be lying in bed, half asleep, and suddenly hear this odd breathing sound coming through the monitor. Not the soft, steady breathing of a sleeping toddler, but something closer to a raspy wheeze. Sometimes it sounded like someone blowing directly into a microphone, this weird mix of static and breath. I remember staring at the screen, watching Lily sleep peacefully, while this noise kept fading in and out. There were plenty of these small things, too. I kept feeling like I was being watched, especially in the hallway and near the stairs. A couple of times I could have sworn I heard a door slowly creak open somewhere in the cabin, but when I went to look, every door was shut like we'd left it. Then there was the third floor. The cabin had this little loft on the top level, past a narrow set of spiral stairs. It was clearly meant for the owner's grandkids. 2 bunk beds, some toys, a small shelf of books. It was a cool space, but it was always really warm up there, like uncomfortably toasty compared to the rest of the place. Lily, who's normally non-stop energy, kept asking to go up there just to sit on one of the bunks. No playing, no exploring, just quietly sitting on the bed and looking around. That's not like her at all. She's usually pulling books off shelves, poking at everything, running in circles. But in that room, she just sat. Now, during the trip, Emma didn't mention anything about feeling weird, and I didn't tell her any of what I was experiencing. I didn't want to freak her out, and honestly, I was trying to convince myself I was just tired or overthinking things. On the drive home, though, out of nowhere, she says, "Can I tell you something about that cabin?" I said, "Yeah, of course." She starts describing almost everything I'd been keeping to myself. How she felt heavy in her chest the whole time, like there was a weight sitting on her. How she heard wheezing on the baby monitor too. How she never fully relaxed there and always made sure she was physically close to me and to Lily, especially in the evenings. And then she tells me something I hadn't known at all. On our first full day, she had taken Lily into the hallway outside the bedrooms. She said Lily suddenly stopped, looked up into the empty space, and started babbling in this very focused, animated way. Not her usual scattered baby babble, but like she was actually talking to someone, pausing like she was listening, then responding again. Lily's about 1.5 years old, and Emma said she'd never seen her do that before. She hadn't told me at the time because she didn't want to freak me out, and thought maybe she was just reading too much into it. The strange part? As soon as we left the cabin, honestly, even just driving away down the gravel road, everything stopped. The heaviness, the weird sounds, the baby monitor noises, the emotional fog. It all just lifted. Back home, it was like none of it had ever happened. I don't know what was going on in that cabin. I'm not saying for sure it was haunted or anything, but I do know that place felt different. And whatever was there, it stayed there when we left. So, I've always believed in ghosts and all that paranormal stuff. But I'm also the first one to go, nah, there's probably a reason whenever something weird happens. I'm a skeptic ghost believer, if that makes any sense. The evidence has to be really solid for me to look at it and say, okay, yeah, ghosts. This one time, though, it really pushed me. Back then, I was doing my internship with a medical tech company in my hometown in Ecuador. I'm a systems engineer, so my job was to go around to different hospitals and check on the machines in the intensive care units, do maintenance, run tests, handle inventory, and all that fun, stressful stuff. One particular day, I had to go to a military hospital. Let's call it Hospital de las Fuerzas Armadas, on the edge of the city. This was during the early days of the COVID pandemic, when everything was still chaos and nobody really knew what was going on. The ICU there was packed with COVID patients. They'd set up an isolation chamber specifically for them, separated from the rest of the ICU by this little passageway. To get into that isolation area, you had to go through 2 automatic doors. Both doors used these motion/hand sensors, where you had to wave your whole hand in front of them, pretty close, so they would open. You couldn't just wiggle a finger from far away and trigger them. And the doors were set so that once they opened, they'd stay open for about 10 seconds, then close again. After that, you'd have to repeat the whole hand gesture for them to open. That detail matters. A lot. So that day, the nurses were all busy on the opposite side of the ICU, dealing with another patient. I needed to go into the isolation chamber to check some of the equipment there. Ventilators, monitors, that kind of thing. One of the nurses, my friend Carla, I'd worked with her a few times, told me, "Just go ahead, we'll be right here if you need anything." I walked through the first door, did the hand thing with the sensor, waited, then the inner door opened. It closed behind me after a few seconds, just like it was supposed to. Inside the isolation chamber, it was quiet in that heavy way hospitals get at night, even though this was daytime. Just machines humming, beeping, and the kind of stillness that feels thick. I started doing my work, checking cables, reading logs, verifying that everything was connected properly. At some point, I glanced up and realized I was a good 4 meters away from the door. Like, really not close. No way the sensor could pick me up from there. And then, I still remember the sound so clearly, the door just whooshed open behind me. That sliding door sound in the middle of that silence felt wrong. My brain kind of froze for a second. I turned around slowly, expecting to see someone standing there. Maybe a nurse, a doctor, anyone. There was no one. The door was just open. The little passageway between the isolation chamber and the rest of the ICU was completely empty. I could see all the way to the other side. No shadows, no movement, nothing. I stood there trying to rationalize it. Maybe the sensor glitched. Maybe the timing was off and it somehow delayed. But I knew how those doors worked. They closed after about 10 seconds. They didn't randomly open again unless someone triggered the sensor from very close. And from my side, I was way too far. From the other side, there was nobody in the passageway. I could see the whole thing. Later, though, when things calmed down a bit, I ran into Carla again at the nurse's station. We were chatting and I casually said, "Hey, by the way, I think the door sensor in the isolation chamber is acting up. It opened by itself when I was inside." She got this look on her face, like a mix of, "Oh no," and, "Oh, not again." She shook her head and said, "That door's fine. They just did maintenance on all the ICU doors last week. Checked the sensors, everything. It's not supposed to do that." So I told her the whole thing, where I was standing, how far away I was, that no one was in the passageway, that I saw it open with my own eyes. Carla just kind of nodded slowly and went, "Yeah, that tracks with what we've been seeing." I remember frowning and saying, "What do you mean, seeing?" And then she started telling me stories. She said that during the night shifts, weird things had been happening, especially in and around that isolation chamber. Machines turning on or off by themselves. Monitors that had been properly set suddenly changing settings, alarms going off for no reason. They'd hear footsteps in the corridor when everyone was already inside their stations. Once, one of the nurses swore she heard a child laughing, like a clear, playful laugh, even though there were no children in that unit at all. Another nurse said she'd feel someone brush past her, like a shoulder bump, in a hallway that was completely empty. They all joked about it at first, but you could tell it made them uneasy. The thing that really got me, though, was when Carla added, very quietly, "All of this, it started after our first COVID patients began to die. Before that, the ICU was stressful, but not weird." Hearing that gave me chills in a way the door itself hadn't, because up until then, I'd been holding on to the idea that it was just a glitch. You know, bad hardware, bad calibration, something like that. My territory, something I could fix. But when she told me the doors had just been serviced and checked, and that other strange things were happening in the same area, around the same time, after patients had passed away, my logical explanations started to feel pretty thin. Even then, I tried to push back. I was like, maybe there's some kind of electrical issue? Interference? The sensors are sensitive. Maybe a reflection or something. And she just looked at me and said, "Maybe, but you weren't the first one to say that door opened when it shouldn't." That stuck with me. I still try to debunk things. I still lean toward rational explanations first. But every now and then, my mind goes back to that moment. Me standing in that isolation chamber, 4 meters away from the sensor, turning around to see that door slowly sliding open onto an empty passageway. And in the middle of a hospital full of loss and fear and unfinished goodbyes, I can't help but think, maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a glitch at all. So, I should probably start by saying I'm not someone who believes in anything paranormal. Like, at all. No ghosts, no guardian angels, no little forest creatures watching over us. I'm an atheist. I'm rational. I like things I can explain. But there's this one thing that happened when I was a kid, about 9 years old, that still makes me pause when I think about it. Even now, as an adult, I'll replay it in my head and go, okay, then what the hell was that? Back then, I still lived in my home country. Our house shared a fence line with my grandparents' place. If you walked out our front door, there was this narrow concrete path that sloped up past a mango tree and ended at the steps to my grandparents' front door. So basically, we were neighbors with a tiny hill in between. I grew up with my cousins on my dad's side. They were more like extra sisters than cousins. We'll call the one in this story Maya. She and her sister split their time between my grandparents' place and their dad's apartment across town because my aunt and uncle were divorced. Their schedule was simple. 1 week at their dad's, 1 week at my grandparents'. Everybody knew the routine. That matters for the story. So one afternoon, I was lying in this old woven swing chair on our front veranda. It squeaked every time you moved, and I was kind of half dozing, half daydreaming, just staring toward the gate. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the front gate swing open. I looked over and saw Maya walking up the sloped path toward my grandparents' house. She was so clear in my vision, it's like a snapshot in my brain. She was wearing what she always called her lucky dress, this light blue dress with little strawberries printed all over it. She loved that dress. Whenever she got to choose her outfit, it was either that or nothing, basically. That was her thing. Instinctively, I sat up and called her name. Maya! She stopped, turned toward me, and gave me this familiar look she had. Kind of a shy half-smile, half-frown, like she wasn't sure if she wanted to be seen, but was happy I'd called out anyway. She raised her hand and gave me a small wave. I waved back. Then she turned away again and kept walking up the path toward my grandparents' door. Everything about it felt normal, ordinary, exactly the way it always was. I lay back down for a bit, not thinking much of it at first. And then, like a minute later, it hit me. Wait, it was her dad's week. I remember just lying there, blinking up at the ceiling, trying to piece that together. I even went over the days in my head. I knew it was still his week. I'd been disappointed the day before because they weren't around to play. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe my aunt had brought them back early. Maybe something came up. No big deal, right? After a few minutes, maybe 10 tops, I got up and decided to head over and see if Maya wanted to play or watch TV. I walked up the same sloped path, climbed the steps, and went straight into my grandparents' kitchen like I always did. The back door was open, and I could hear the TV from the living room. My aunt was standing by the counter, cutting vegetables. I went over, hugged her around the waist, and asked, "Tia, where's Maya? Is she in the bedroom?" She gave me this puzzled look, like I'd just asked her what planet we were on. "She's with her dad this week," she said. "Why?" My aunt's face changed. The confusion turned into something more serious. She put the knife down. "No, sweetheart," she said slowly. "She's not here. I dropped her off at her dad's early this morning. She won't be here until next week." I remember this weird, cold feeling spreading through my chest. It was like my body realized something was off before my brain caught up. My grandma, who'd been sitting at the table peeling garlic, turned to look at me. "What happened?" she asked. My aunt told her. "She says she saw Maya outside just now." My grandma shook her head. No, Maya's with her father. She hasn't been here today at all." I just stood there between them, completely thrown off. I can still feel the kitchen tiles under my bare feet, still see the little pile of garlic skins on the table, still hear the TV in the background. Everything normal, except this one thing that absolutely wasn't. I tried to explain it again, slower this time. I told them exactly what I'd seen. Maya coming through the gate, walking up the slope, wearing her favorite dress. The way she turned to me, that shy little half-smile, the way she waved. It wasn't a blur. It wasn't a shadow. I wasn't squinting through a window or anything. I was outside, in the middle of the afternoon, wide awake. My aunt kept insisting, gently but firmly, "She's not here." And she wasn't joking. My aunt isn't the prank type, and she looked genuinely worried that I was so insistent about it. At some point, my grandma even went and looked around the house, checked the bedroom, the front yard, just to humor me, I think. Of course, there was no one. I remember feeling this mix of embarrassment and stubborn certainty. Like, I knew what I saw. I felt almost guilty, like I was accusing reality of being wrong. Eventually, everyone kind of shrugged it off. My aunt went back to cooking. My grandma went back to her garlic. I went home feeling like I'd stepped out of a movie scene and now had to pretend everything was normal again. Over the years, I've tried to explain it to myself. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe my brain, missing my cousins, just filled in the gap and projected what it wanted to see. Maybe I had a dream and mixed it up with real life. Kids do that, right? That's the rational part of me talking. The part that still doesn't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything beyond what we can measure and study. But here's the thing. The memory itself feels as solid and sharp as any other real memory from my childhood. The sound of the gate, the way the path looked in that moment, the little swing of Maya's dress as she walked, the exact expression on her face when she turned to wave. It doesn't feel like a dream when I replay it. It feels as real as breakfast this morning. Do I think it was something supernatural? I honestly don't know. Even now, I hesitate to say that. It's not who I am, and it doesn't fit with how I see the world. But I also can't explain it away completely. And that tiny gap between what I believe and what I experienced, that's what stays with me. So yeah, I still don't believe in ghosts. But that day definitely makes me wonder. So, let me tell you about this house. My grandmother, everyone in the family calls her Nana Ruth, bought a little place with her husband back in the early 1960s. It's a modest 4-bedroom, 1.5-bath home in a quiet, working-class neighborhood. Small town, everybody knows everybody, not a lot of crime, nothing dramatic on the surface. My dad and his brothers grew up there, and I spent a huge chunk of my childhood running around that house. On paper, it should have been the kind of place you feel safe in forever. But there's a shadow on that house. See, Nana's husband, his name was Victor, was an alcoholic and a very cruel man. I have never been able to call him Grandpa. He doesn't deserve that word. He was abusive to my grandmother and to the kids until the day he died. And he died in that house when I was about 6 years old. From the outside, the place is just normal. A plain little house with faded siding, overgrown shrubs, a broken step on the porch. But inside, it has this heaviness to it. Even as an adult, I always tried to avoid the bedrooms and especially the hallway that leads to them. There's this long, narrow hallway, no windows, just dim light from an old ceiling fixture. Every time I walk down it, I get this overwhelming feeling that someone is right behind me, staring at my back. I am always afraid to turn around. It's like the air thickens halfway down, and something in me just wants to bolt. My last really intense experience there, before I had kids, happened when I was around 15 or 16. I had stayed over at Nana's after a Friday night football game because her house was closer to the school. It was late, I was tired, and it just made sense to crash there instead of making the drive back home. Nana has always been an early riser, the kind who's up before sunrise, shuffling around making coffee and humming to herself. So when I woke up, her bed was already empty. She was somewhere in the house, probably in the kitchen or living room. I got up, grabbed my clothes, and took a shower. I remember thinking I'd get ready, go meet my friends for a bit, then head home. At the very end of that creepy hallway, there's this big old mirror mounted on the wall. It's the best place in the house to put on makeup, so I stood there, in that hallway I hate, doing my hair and eyeliner. I tried to ignore the feeling that I was being watched, because honestly, I'd felt that way in that spot my whole life. I was almost finished when I heard something from the guest room I'd slept in. A scraping sound, like heavy furniture shifting. It sounded exactly like the bed being dragged an inch or two across the floor. The hair on the back of my neck stood up immediately, and deep down, I felt this horrible certainty. I know what this is. Don't look. Just don't look. But of course, I'm stubborn. I shook my head and told myself I was being silly. Old houses make noises, right? Pipes, wood, whatever. Then I heard it again. This time it wasn't just a scrape. It sounded like someone jumping onto the bed. I heard the metal frame on wheels clatter and roll a little, the creak of the box spring, the definite weight of something landing. I froze. Everything in me screamed, "Don't open that door. Don't you dare." But the logical part of my brain was like, "You're being dramatic. Just prove to yourself it's nothing." So I opened the guest room door. The room was still. The bed wasn't moving. There was no one there. No one standing, no one crouching, nothing visible at all. Just quiet. I swear to you, it looked like footprints on the bed. Not perfectly clear, but enough that you could tell where something had pressed down and then lifted off, leaving these lighter spots in the fabric, like the shape of feet had been there a moment before. That was it for me. I packed my things, said a quick goodbye to Nana, and I didn't spend another night there alone again. Daytime visits, sure. Sleepovers by myself? Absolutely not. Fast forward to now. Recently, I've been house-sitting for Nana because she has dementia and can't live there alone anymore. She's in a care facility a couple of towns over, and I've been keeping an eye on the place, checking the mail, making sure the house doesn't just sit completely empty. Sometimes I stay there with my kids. I've got two of them, my son, who's 16, and my daughter, who's 11. They've always known there's weird energy in Nana's house, but I've tried not to load them down with the heavy details. So today, I say today, and I can still feel that sick feeling in my stomach. I was at Nana's house with the kids in the morning, and then I left for work. My shift was from 9 to 1, nothing special. The kids wanted to sleep in, hang out on their phones, just a lazy day. Around late morning, my phone rang. It was my son. He was frantic. He told me, "Mom, there's banging in the kitchen." At first I thought maybe something fell, or they were just playing around. But he kept talking, and his voice was shaking. He said he'd gone to check the kitchen because he heard cabinets slamming. When he got there, several cabinet doors were wide open. He thought maybe he or his sister had left them open earlier and just forgot, so he closed everything and went back to the den where they were watching TV. Then, a few minutes later, it started again. This time he described it as loud, cabinets banging open and shut repeatedly. He went back into the kitchen and now drawers were pulled open too. Cabinets, drawers, all open. He said at first his brain just kind of stalled. He couldn't make sense of it. He thought, maybe there's a draft? Maybe the house is settling? But then he realized, drawers don't just slide themselves open. While he's telling me this, I can hear the noise through the phone. Dull thuds, sharp bangs, like someone angrily slamming doors. He got off the call because he wanted to record what was happening, because of course, that's what kids do these days, right? Document everything. And that's when things moved from the kitchen toward the back of the house, down the hallway. He told me later that he watched the bedroom doors slam shut one after another. And at the very end of the hallway, there's this pantry-style closet with little cabinet doors on top. Those started banging open and closed on their own. The same hallway where I have always felt like something is behind me. My son called me again, full-on panic in his voice. I could hear my daughter in the background, asking what was happening, starting to cry. I took a breath and tried to stay calm for them, even though my own heart was racing. I told him, "Listen to me. Stay with your sister. Don't talk to it. Don't yell at it. Don't try to record anything else. Just stay together, stay in the den, and keep the TV on. I'm coming." I also called my dad, the kids' grandpa, and asked him to get over there right away, just to be with them until I could leave work and drive back. I felt horrible. I was the one who decided it was okay to stay in that house. I was the one who brushed my own experiences aside and told myself everything was fine. They're not kids who scare easily. They're used to me telling them ghost stories and laughing about creepy movies. That day, they weren't laughing. It keeps sticking in my mind that Nana isn't living there anymore. She's in a facility, confused most days, not sure what year it is. And this house that held her and her pain and all those years with Victor, it's just sitting. Empty of her, but not empty. I don't know if this is happening because she's gone and something in the house doesn't like that, or if it's because I tried to convince myself it was all in my imagination, and now it's reminding me it's not. What I do know is that I feel guilty. Guilty that my kids had to experience what I've always felt but never fully told them about. Guilty that I dismissed my own fear for so long. People always ask, was it real? And all I can say is, it was real enough that we don't stay there overnight anymore. Whatever is in that house, it hasn't let go. And after what happened to my kids, I'm finally listening. So, this is one of those stories I usually only tell late at night, when people are already a little spooked. But you asked, so here we go. I still drive past the house sometimes. Haven't been inside since, the early 2000s? My friend's family sold it and moved away ages ago. My friend, let's call him Marco, grew up there. It was a kind of patched-together family, a bunch of half-siblings, all raised by their biker mom, Rita. Leather jacket, bandana, big laugh, soft heart. They were all genuinely good people. The house itself was this old white farmhouse, 2 stories, with a wraparound porch on the front and one side, and a faded red metal roof that popped in the sun. Weird things happened there. A lot of them. They didn't feel evil, exactly. Just off. Strange. Like the house was always paying attention. One of the first things that stuck with me happened when they were redoing the rooms near the garage. They were stripping old wallpaper, like really old, yellowed stuff that looked like it had seen several generations, and under one of the layers, above a couple of door frames, they found this writing. I remember asking Marco, "Hey, what's that?" It looked like some kind of faded script, not English, not anything I recognized. When I asked again later, he told me, very casually, "Yeah, we had a priest come by. Whatever was there rubbed off while they were cleaning, so he came and wrote something new over it and blessed the place." He said it like he was talking about replacing a light bulb. The younger siblings used to complain about stuff getting thrown around the house. I figured they were just messing with each other. Then one afternoon, we were all in the living room when we heard this loud clack, clack, clack in the kitchen, like something hitting the wall. We went in and found 2 plastic pill bottles lying all the way against the far wall, maybe 15 feet from where they were supposed to be. They normally sat in this little wooden organizer by the fridge, way too far for them to have just tipped over. No one had been in there. No windows open. Nothing. We just kind of stared at them, looked at each other, and did that nervous laugh you do when you don't want to admit something's weird. Another time, when Marco's mom was out, we were in the den playing music, loud enough that she would have yelled at us if she'd been home. He had these big old speakers, the kind from the 80s that look like furniture. On top of one of them, there was this big glass jug full of seashells his mom collected from trips down to the coast. We paused the music to go grab snacks. While we were in the kitchen, we heard this sharp, unmistakable crash. Not like something just fell, it sounded like it exploded. We ran back in, and the jug of shells was shattered dead center in the middle of the floor, glass and shells spread out in a circle. Here's the thing. The spot on the floor where it smashed was a good 10 feet away from the speaker it had been sitting on. We looked at each other like, okay, No way that just vibrated off. We decided to test it because we were geniuses. We put a pillow under the other speaker, put a second container of shells up there, and cranked the music as loud as we could. Bass shaking the floor, windows rattling. Nothing. We even tried physically shoving the speaker, and we realized you'd have to hit it pretty hard to launch something that far. It wasn't just a little wobble. Eventually, we swept it all up, tossed the broken glass, and pretended we were totally fine with whatever just happened. We've been riding our bikes in the yard, doing lazy circles in the grass. At one point, Marco said he needed to run inside to use the bathroom. He went in through the side door, and I stayed out front, just coasting near the porch. Maybe 30 seconds after he disappeared inside, I glanced up at the second floor, at his bedroom window. His room had these thin, sheer curtains that let the light through, and I see a figure in the window. Just a shape, tall enough to be a person, standing there, like it was looking out through the curtains. Then, in this quick, deliberate movement, it darted sideways, out of view. Not like a shadow drifting, like someone stepping sharply away from the window. A few seconds later, Marco comes back out from the other side of the house, from the back door. I said, "Dude, what were you doing upstairs?" He frowned and shook his head. "I wasn't upstairs. I just went to the bathroom downstairs." We both kind of froze. We went back inside, went straight up to his room, and checked everywhere. Under the bed, in the closet, behind the door. Nothing. The windows were locked from the inside, but in the corner, behind his dresser, we found a tiny pile of seashells. Just a little cluster of them, like somebody had placed them there deliberately. He didn't even know they were there. The one that really stuck with me, though, the one that still makes my chest tighten a bit when I talk about it, happened one night when I slept over. They put me in the guest room at the end of the hall. Marco was in his bedroom, just down from me. The house got very quiet at night. No traffic nearby, just crickets and the old wood settling. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, steady steps on the old floorboards. Creak, creak, creak. I figured it was Marco going to the bathroom or grabbing a snack. I didn't even open my eyes at first. The steps stopped right outside my door. Then I heard whispering. 2 voices, low and hushed. I couldn't make out words, just the tones. A boy and a girl, sounding like they were right on the other side of the door. The doorknob turned and the door eased open. I tried to sit up, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak. It was like my body just refused to respond. 2 figures walked in. They looked like kids, maybe 10 or 12 years old. A boy and a girl. They weren't solid. There was this hazy, greenish glow around them, like mist lit from inside. Their faces were soft and blurry, but you could still tell they were looking at each other, then at me. They stood near the foot of the bed, whispering to each other in that same low, hurried way, like siblings trying not to wake their parents. Every instinct in me was screaming to yell, to move, to do something, but I was just pinned there. Then, as calmly as they came in, they turned and walked back toward the doorway. I don't remember the door closing. I don't remember drifting off. There's just this blank space after they left. Morning came like nothing had happened. Sunlight through the curtains, birds outside. My door was closed. I went straight to Marco's room. I said, "Did you get up last night?" I heard walking and talking in the hallway. He sat up and rubbed his eyes and said, "Yeah, I heard that too, but it wasn't me. My door handle's busted, remember? If I shut it all the way, I need a butter knife for on the inside." Which was true. I'd seen him do it. If that door clicked shut, he was basically locked in without something flat to jimmy the latch. I told him what I'd seen. The two figures, the greenish haze, the whispering. He went quiet for a minute and then said, "I've heard talking and footsteps in the attic before, like kids. Thought I was imagining it." There were a bunch of other little things over the years. Objects not where we left them, doors that we were sure we'd closed standing wide open, cold spots in the hall on hot summer nights. Nothing ever tried to hurt us. It was more like whatever was there wanted to be noticed or remembered. Now, when I drive past that old farmhouse, someone else's car is in the driveway. Someone else's curtains are in the windows. The porch is repainted. The roof looks newer. But every time I look at that upstairs window, the one that used to be Marco's room, I still half expect to see that shape behind the sheer curtains. And if I'm being really honest with you, a small part of me wonders if those kids, with their whispering and their little piles of seashells, are still wandering that hallway at night, checking on whoever sleeps in the guest room now. So hey, thanks for listening. I'm Mia, and this is about my dad, Tom, and the house I grew up in. My parents had our house built in the late 80s on a piece of land that had been in my mom's family for generations. I'm 31 now, and that house was literally my whole world from the time I came home from the hospital until I moved out at 21. It's the only home I really picture when I think of my childhood. My mom, Elena, got breast cancer really young. She fought it for years. Eventually, she came home on hospice and she passed away in my old bedroom. That was back in 2018, so about 7 years ago now. In all those years I lived there, nothing weird ever happened. No cold spots, no doors slamming, no creepy shadows. Just normal family life. TV in the living room, my mom's cooking, my dad tinkering with his toys in the garage. Now it's just my dad living there. He's 61, retired, and spends his days doing what he loves, fussing with his motorbikes, gardening, watching racing, and hanging out with the grandkids when they come over. He's not the type to dramatize anything. Very it is what it is kind of guy. And then, a couple of months ago, the house started acting strange. The first thing that happened, my dad was sitting on the couch one evening, scrolling on his phone, when he heard this noise from my old bedroom. That room is basically the grandkids' playroom now. I've got 2 kids who keep a whole army of toys there. Blocks, cars, dolls, you name it. He said the sound was exactly like when the kids are there, just absolutely wrecking the place. Toys shuffling, something rolling across the floor. That chaotic, grandkid energy in sound form. He told me he actually called out like, "Hey, you guys still here?" before realizing he was alone in the house. He gets up, walks down the hallway, and the second he steps into my old room, silence. The toys are just sitting there, nothing moved, nothing obviously out of place. Window closed, no TV on, nothing. He's practical, so he shrugs it off. Maybe something settled. Maybe the house creaked weird. Whatever. Then the second thing happens. At the end of the hallway, there's this big framed picture of me as a kid, like 8 years old, missing front teeth, hair in 2 lopsided pigtails. It's been hanging there for, I don't know, over 20 years. Same spot, same nail, never an issue. One afternoon, my dad's in the kitchen making coffee when he hears this loud crash. He hurries over, and that big picture of me is lying face down on the floor. His first thought is totally normal. Well, guess the hook finally gave out. So he checks the wall, thinking he's going to have to replace the nail or the hanger. But the hook is perfectly fine. The wire is fine. Nothing's bent or broken. He picks the frame up, hangs it back on the same hook, and it goes right back into place like nothing happened. And this is not some flimsy little frame. It's big and heavy. It shouldn't just leap off the wall for no reason after 2 decades of being perfectly happy there. He told me that one made the hair on the back of his neck stand up a little. Then we get to the third thing, which is honestly the weirdest to me. My dad usually keeps one of his mountain bikes inside the house while he's working on it. He's been upgrading parts, swapping out the brakes, that kind of thing. He'll lean the bike sideways against one of the dining chairs by the kitchen table so he can grab it easily and work on it. He jumps out of bed, goes to check, probably thinking one of the kids left something on the edge of the counter or whatever. The chair and the bike are both on the floor. But here's the part that bugs me. The chair is on top of the bike. When he set it up, the bike had been leaning against the chair. So for the chair to end up on top, something had to push the bike away from the chair hard enough to take the chair with it and flip it over onto the bike. It's not like the bike could just slowly slide and gently tip the chair. That doesn't match how he found it. He walked me through it like a crime scene, and even just thinking it through with him, it made no sense. When he told me about it, he actually laughed and said, "Guess I finally annoyed your mother. She never liked that bike in the house." And honestly, that sounds exactly like her. She hated clutter and was always telling him, "Tom, the garage exists for a reason." Now, I've always been into paranormal stuff in kind of a fun, curious way. Ghost adventures, those caught-on-camera shows, creepy Reddit threads, all of it. But it's always been something happening to strangers, on TV or online. This is the first time in my life that I'm hearing about something I'd call genuinely unexplainable. Happening to someone I actually know, in my house. It really shook me. I'm more spooked for him than he is for himself. I asked him, "Doesn't this freak you out at all?" And he just went, "Nah, it's either your mom or the house settling. Either way, I'm going back to sleep." He honestly seems fine, calm, almost comforted by the idea it might be my mom. Me, on the other hand, I'm sitting there thinking, do I need to go over there with Sage or something? Should I get cameras? My brain went straight to full investigation mode. Some people I've talked to suggested he might be lonely and making things up to get my attention. But that doesn't fit him at all. My dad's not a dramatic person. He's very straightforward. He's told me many times he has zero interest in getting remarried, that he's happy spending his money on motorbikes and day trips and spoiling the grandkids. I even asked if he wanted a dog, for company, and he said, "Absolutely not, too much work," and laughed. He likes his routine. He likes his space. He doesn't act lonely. He's also only 61. He's not confused. He's not forgetful. He's sharp, still does his own mechanical work, still argues about sports with my brother-in-law. I genuinely don't think he'd make this up, and I don't think he'd misinterpret normal noises 3 separate times like this. People have also brought up the possibility of rodents. Trust me, I asked him specifically about that. He's meticulous. No droppings, no chewed boxes, no scratching in the walls. Nothing that screams mouse problem. And honestly, a mouse isn't going to fling my big childhood photo off the wall. What really sticks with me is that first noise, like kids tossing toys in my old bedroom. Some people suggested maybe there's a child spirit mimicking what my kids do when they're there. Like it replays that energy when the house is empty. And I'm just sitting here like, okay, but why? Why would some random child spirit be in our house? There's no story of a kid dying on the property or anything like that, at least not that we know of. Then there's the other possibility, that it's my mom. And that's where it gets really emotional for me, because I've always hoped for some kind of sign from her. A dream that feels different, a song at just the right moment, something. And up until now, I've felt nothing, just memories. And if it is her, why knock down my picture? Like, Mom, seriously? There are gentler ways to say hi. I don't know. I go back and forth between being totally freaked out and weirdly comforted. On one hand, things being knocked over and photos crashing off walls, that's unsettling. On the other hand, the fact that my dad isn't scared, that he's kind of joking about it, makes it feel less like a horror movie and more like the house is nudging him. Like, hey, I'm still here. I guess that's why I'm talking about it out loud like this. Part of me is hoping someone who studies this sort of thing, or has real experience with it, might hear this and say, yeah, that pattern makes sense, or here's what you can try. Do I go over there and burn sage? Do we set up cameras and see if anything shows up? Do I just accept that some things sit right on the edge of what we can explain and leave it at that? I honestly don't know. What I do know is that my dad is still in that house, still drinking his coffee in the kitchen under that same big picture of me, still working on his bikes, still laughing with my kids when they come over to play with the very toys that, some nights, seem to move without them. And whether it's my mom, some echo of my childhood, the house settling, or something we don't have words for yet, I just really want him to stay safe. And maybe, deep down, I want to believe that love doesn't just disappear. That maybe, sometimes, it knocks a frame off the wall or pushes over a bike to remind you it's still there. So, let me talk to you for a minute. Have you ever just stared at a room and suddenly felt like there was more going on than what your eyes could see? Not in a spooky, something's behind me way, more in a, this can't be all there is kind of way. That's where my mind tends to live. In our everyday reality, we move around in 3 dimensions: length, width, and height. You can picture that classic XYZ graph from school, right? Left and right, up and down, forward and back. That's our playground. Now, we can imagine one-dimensional things, like a single line, or 2-dimensional things, like a flat drawing on a piece of paper. Those are below our level, dimension-wise. We can see them, we can manipulate them, but we can't really step up into our world. A little stick figure we draw stays stuck on the page. Here's where it gets interesting. Mathematically, physicists have been pretty serious for a while about the idea that there are more dimensions than just these 3. Higher dimensions. We can work with them in equations, we can predict things with them, but we can't see them directly. They're kind of like the backstage of reality, present, crucial, but hidden from the audience. And that brings me to ghosts. Think about how ghost stories usually go. They appear in our space, they move things, we see or hear them, they seem stuck in a house or a place, but we can't go wherever they are. We don't step into their world, even if they sometimes slip into ours. Why is that? Why does it seem like the traffic is mostly one way? Now, let's add time to the mix. Einstein talked about space and time as one thing, space-time. Instead of 3 dimensions of space and then this separate ticking clock, it's all woven together. You can think of it as a 4-dimensional fabric. If you could somehow step outside of that, like really step outside, I imagine you'd see every moment laid out at once. Not just your life, but everything. Every second, every tiny shift, all there together. To me, it's like walking into a huge hall filled with shelves, and on each shelf are these little moments, like crystal spheres. Every choice, every heartbeat, every memory is there, not one after the other, but all at once. Time becomes something you can move through like a room, not just something that drags you along. And I think somewhere in that layered structure, between our 3-dimensional experience and whatever comes next, there's a sort of in-between zone. A kind of waiting room between life and what we'd call the afterlife. That's where I imagine ghosts might be. If a 2-dimensional being lived on a piece of paper, we could tap the page, pick it up, fold it, see everything at once. They wouldn't be able to do the same to us. We'd exist outside their comprehension. I think a 4-dimensional being might look at us in a similar way. They could reach down into our reality, step into our time briefly, appear as an apparition, but we could never quite climb up to where they are. So when people talk about hauntings, shadows in the hallway, footsteps when no one's there, the same sound repeating at the same time every night, I wonder if that's what's going on. If you think of reality like an old film strip, time is just what keeps the frames moving in order. But those frames, the past, the present, the future, they might all exist at once. We just experience them one after another, so it feels manageable. And then there's the big question. What happens after all this? If there is an afterlife, I don't picture it as clouds and harps. I imagine it as another level of reality, a fifth dimension, or maybe beyond that, where all timelines, all versions of events, all paths are somehow understood and integrated. A place where awareness is expanded, where your senses aren't limited to this body or this brain, where thought and reality begin to match so that mind equals matter. If you think of something, you experience it. If you feel something deeply, it shapes what's around you. I picture it as the place where whatever you want to call the greater consciousness lives. The source, the universe itself waking up, God, the creator, however you name it. A place where everything that ever was and ever will be is gathered and known, but not in a cold, mechanical way, in a loving, connected way. I think that's where we're meant to go when we die. Our three-dimensional space and that four-dimensional space-time fabric feel like scaffolding, temporary supports that hold us in place long enough to grow, learn, and choose who we want to become. Once we've finished whatever we're doing here, I like to believe we slip out of that structure and into something freer, wider, less bound by before and after. From our side, that looks like stepping into unreality, the afterworld. But from that side, maybe it's the most real thing there is. So when I think about ghosts, higher dimensions, and the afterlife, I don't see them as separate topics. I see them as different layers of the same story. We're here, right now, walking around in 3D, anchored in time. Some souls might get stuck between the floors of this cosmic building. Those are the hauntings and echoes people feel. And beyond that, there's a higher level waiting, where everything makes sense in a way we can't quite imagine yet. And honestly, that idea comforts me, because it means that nothing is really lost, just moved. Nothing truly ends, just changes dimension. And one day, when it's our turn, we'll step through that doorway too, and finally see how all of this fits together. So, let me tell you about the time I realized something had basically been following me my whole life. When I was about 5, my parents and I moved into this condo near the beach in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was one of those airy, 80s-looking places with big windows and a spiral staircase in the living room. The stairs led up to this loft, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet, kind of like a little open room that looked over everything. On moving day, I remember being so excited. I grabbed this cardboard box full of toys, Barbies, little plastic dinosaurs, all that, and dragged it up the spiral staircase to claim the loft as my secret hideout. The second I stepped off that last stair and onto the carpet up there, it was like walking into a refrigerator, just freezing. And not like, oh, the AC is on. It was a different kind of cold. My chest tightened, and out of nowhere I got this intense, urgent feeling. Leave. Now. I didn't see anything. Nothing moved. But my whole body just panicked. I dropped the box and ran back down the stairs as fast as I could, sobbing. After that, I never went back up there again. Not once. My parents thought I was just being a dramatic little kid. And at that age, I didn't even know what a ghost was. I just knew that space felt wrong. Fast forward to when I'm about 12. We're at dinner one night, and my parents randomly bring up that condo, just casually. And my mom goes, "Yeah, that place was weird." I'm like, what do you mean weird? That's when they finally tell me that the whole time we lived there, strange stuff was happening. Every night, almost exactly around 3 a.m., my mom swears it was always a little before 3, our cat would start this eerie, crying sort of meow. Not a normal feed me sound, more like something between a wail and a scream. Right after that, my parents would hear the sound of high heels walking across the living room floor. Clear as day. Click, click, click. They'd hear them go past the couch, around the coffee table, and right up to the hallway outside their bedroom. My mom thought it was just pipes or the neighbors at first, but it was carpet in there. No one should have sounded like that on carpet. It wasn't just them either. Guests who stayed over had their own stories. My grandma stayed with us once. She told my mom she heard someone walking around the living room late at night, and then, this is the part that freaks me out, she said she felt someone sit down on the edge of her bed. The mattress actually dipped. She thought it was my mom checking on her, until she realized my mom never came in. On one of our last nights in that condo, after months of this, my parents had kind of gotten used to it. You can get used to anything, I guess. They'd hear the heels, the cat, the random noises, and just roll over and go back to sleep. But this one night, they were in bed, half asleep, when suddenly the bathroom door in their room slammed open. Not just creaked, slammed. Hard enough that it hit the stopper. That was the moment it stopped being quirky old building and turned into, okay, we're not alone here. Not long after that, my parents divorced. My mom and I moved to a new house in the suburbs, one of those freshly built neighborhoods with tiny trees and identical houses. Everything was clean and bright and smelled like new paint. On the surface, it was the total opposite of that condo. For a while, it felt normal, safe. When I was around 6, my dad would stay over some nights and tuck me in. He'd sit on the edge of my bed and wait until I fell asleep, then quietly sneak out and go back to the guest room. He said, "Just going to the bathroom," in this tired voice, and walked out of my room. Here's the weird part. There was a bathroom literally just down the hall from my bedroom, but instead of turning right toward it, I heard his footsteps going down the stairs. That didn't make sense to me, even as a kid. So, of course, I got curious and followed. I padded down the stairs and heard the faint sound of the front door closing. When I reached the bottom, I stopped by the door, confused. Off to my left was this short hallway that led to the downstairs bathroom, maybe 10 or 15 feet away. The bathroom door was open, and it was dark except for a soft glow from the kitchen light behind me. From where I was standing, I could see just inside the bathroom, part of the sink, and a reflection of a framed picture on the wall. I called out, "Dad?" And that's when I heard it. Click, click, click. The distinct sound of high heels walking toward me from that hallway. Now, keep in mind, my parents had never told me about the footsteps in the condo. I didn't know anything about that yet. So my brain didn't go, "Oh, ghost." It just went, "Something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong." Every instinct I had screamed, "Run!" I bolted up the stairs, completely losing it, sobbing so hard I could barely talk. My uncle was staying with us at the time. He heard me and came out of the guest room, asking what happened. When I finally managed to tell him I heard heels walking toward me by the bathroom, he got this look, this flash of real fear, before he caught himself. He knew about the old condo. I didn't know that yet. He knelt down and hugged me and said, Hey, it's okay. Ghosts can't go up the stairs." Later, I realized he just made that up to calm me down. But at the time, I clung to it like it was a rule of the universe. A few other strange things happened in that house, but spread out over the years. When I was about 7, I was playing downstairs while my family was in the kitchen. Our staircase was U-shaped, and one of the walls along it was covered in mirrors going all the way up. From the bottom, you could see the upper flight of stairs, part of the hallway, and the doors to the first couple of bedrooms reflected. My bedroom door was open, light on. I remember glancing up in the mirror and seeing my doorway, bright and empty. I turned back to whatever I was doing. probably playing with some toy on the rug, for maybe 15 seconds. When I looked up again, my room was dark. The door was still open, but the light was off. Everyone was still crowded around the kitchen island. Nobody had gone upstairs. I figured, okay, the bulb blew out. So I shrugged it off and went upstairs to check. I walked into my room, flipped the switch, and the light came right back on. No flicker, no delay, just on. I stood there for a second like, cool, guess the house just turns the lights off for fun now. The last thing that happened in that house was actually kind of funny now, even though it freaked me out then. As a kid, I had these little tics. One of them was making this weird, deliberate voice crack sound. A kind of, squeak I'd do without thinking. One day I was in the shower, just zoning out, and I did it. Immediately, from right behind me, I heard the exact same sound. Same tone, same pitch, same timing. As loud and clear as the water hitting the tub. I whipped around, shampoo in my eyes, absolutely certain someone was in there with me. And of course, there was no one. By the time I hit 17, you'd think I'd be like, yeah, no thanks, I've had enough. But teenagers are stupidly brave and bored, so I went the opposite direction. I started actually looking for haunted places. Naturally, my friends and I decided that was the perfect place to hang out. One night, a big group of us went to explore. We squeezed through a gap in the fence, climbed in through a broken side door, and worked our way down to the basement area where the morgue was. There were rusty gurneys, busted tiles, graffiti everywhere. The whole place smelled like mold and old metal. Because there were so many of us, we felt invincible. Strength in numbers, you know? So we started doing that dumb horror movie thing, yelling into the dark. Show us you're here. We're not scared. Stuff like that. A few seconds after we stopped shouting, we heard this massive bang behind us. It sounded like someone dropped a steel door flat onto the floor, maybe 10 feet away. It was loud enough that it echoed down the hallway. All of us turned at the exact same time. Nobody was there. Nothing had moved. There was nothing near the spot the sound came from that could have just fallen. No loose metal sheet, no door swinging. There was this 2-second pause where we all processed that, and then everyone started running at once. We sprinted back up the stairs and out of the building, hearts pounding, thinking it was over. When we got outside and finally caught our breath, my friend, let's call him Nico, lifted his shirt because he said his back was burning. Right across his skin, from one shoulder blade toward his spine, was this long, red scratch. Fresh. Like something had raked a single claw across him. None of us had seen him bump into anything. There was nothing sticking out of the walls where he'd been standing. It just appeared. You'd think that would have been enough. But a couple months later, we were still hooked on finding creepy places. Someone heard about this old, abandoned state prison a couple hours away. It wasn't enormous, but it was completely cut off, surrounded by overgrown fields and canals. You had to park far away and walk in along this dirt path. By the time you reached it, you couldn't see any houses, no streetlights, nothing. Just this dead concrete building in the middle of nowhere. So, obviously, we went. That night, Nico came again. He had a few drinks before we went in, so he was loose and jokey, but still walking okay. Inside, the air felt heavy, like the whole place had soaked up every bad thing that ever happened there. We were in the main courtyard, shining our flashlights around, peeking into empty cells, just messing around. Nico started wandering away from the group, toward this far corner where the fence met the building. He was still in sight, just a little off to the side. He stopped, turned his head to the left, and just froze. Like a video that paused mid-frame. From where we were, there was a wall blocking our view of whatever he was looking at. After a few seconds, he turned back toward us and said, very calmly, "We should go." We thought he was just being dramatic. We teased him, said, "Oh, did the prison ghost tell you that?" and kept exploring. Eventually, we found this small doorway that led into a low, narrow passageway, maybe 4 feet high, running between the backs of the cells and the outer wall. You had to crouch the whole time. Along the wall, there were these little rectangular openings, maybe 8 by 15 inches, where you could look into each cell like a peephole. We went in single file, crouching and shuffling along, pointing our flashlights through each opening, going deeper and deeper. The further in we went, the more the sounds from outside disappeared. It was just our breathing and our shoes scraping the concrete. At some point, Nico ended up behind us, still checking each opening with his light. We decided we'd go out a different exit and try to jump out at him for a cheap scare. Then, all at once, he whips around and starts moving quickly toward us. Not quite running, but not walking either. When he reaches us, his face is pale. He says, "We need to get out. Now." We're like, "What did you see?" He says, "I'm not joking. I think there's a body in one of those cells." We honestly still thought he was messing with us. Nico wasn't the prank type, but the whole situation felt surreal, and we didn't want to believe him. So we're like, "Okay, well, if you're so freaked out, show us what you saw in the courtyard first." We retraced our steps, climbed back out of the passage, and walked to that corner where he'd frozen earlier. We turned the corner around this little jut of wall, and there he was. A black man, sitting in a chair, right up against the fence, facing straight ahead. Not translucent, not glowing, not anything. He looked solid, real. Just a regular guy, arms resting on his legs, staring. The problem was, there was no car, no boat, no path that didn't involve a long walk through pitch-dark nowhere. We hadn't seen a single sign of another person the entire time. We all stopped. The air felt thick. The man slowly turned his head, looked directly at us, and said, very softly, "Hi." That was it. No threat, no jump scare. Just, "Hi." We absolutely lost it, spun around and bolted. We didn't stop until we were halfway back down the dirt path. My legs were shaking so hard I could barely walk. On the walk back, Nico kept rubbing the side of his neck, saying it burned. We were like, "You probably got bit by a mosquito, chill." Then one of our friends shined his flashlight on Nico's neck and went, Dude, what is that?" Wrapped around his throat, like someone had grabbed him from behind, was this red, distinct mark. Not just a patch of irritated skin, a clear line all the way around. Like fingers had been there. None of us joked after that. The rest of the walk was quiet. So yeah, I still don't know what to believe. Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the latest stories. I absolutely love reading your comments. They make me enjoy this job even more. I really love sharing paranormal stories from all around the world with you. Now, let me help you fall asleep a little easier. Let's get started, and don't forget to send me your own paranormal experiences. So, I don't tell this story very often. Even now, just thinking about it makes my stomach do that weird flip. It happened when I was in high school, a little over 10 years ago. I was maybe 16, 17. Back then, my favorite thing in the world was rearranging my room. Constantly. New paint, new layout, thrift store furniture. If I could drag it up the stairs by myself, it was fair game. My dad, well, my stepdad, Leo, worked in this old office building. The basement was basically a graveyard for stuff left behind by previous tenants. Boxes, broken chairs, random electronics, filing cabinets full of who knows what. He knew I loved old creepy junk, as he called it, so one weekend he said, "If you want to poke around down there, take whatever. They're going to clear it out anyway." So I go down into this basement. It's that kind of place where the air feels thick and dusty, and the lights flicker just enough to annoy you. I'm digging around, not really finding anything special. Some chipped lamps, a cracked mirror. When I see it, it's this old film projector, real old school, heavy metal body, with this faded manufacturer's logo I didn't recognize. The plug was foreign, looked like something from Europe, and right next to it, a cardboard box just packed with film reels. There must have been at least 20 or 30 of them. The labels were written in this language I couldn't read, looked Eastern European, maybe Cyrillic, but I honestly had no idea. I didn't care what was on them. I just thought it would look cool in my room. That was it. Pure aesthetic. I took the projector and the whole box of reels home, hauled them up to my room, and set the projector on my dresser like this weird, artsy centerpiece. The reels I stacked on a shelf. I didn't even bother wiping the dust off. And that very first night, things started. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and realizing I couldn't move. At all. I'd never had sleep paralysis before, so I didn't even know that's what it was. I'm just lying there, frozen, heart pounding. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this faint light. The projector is on. Except it's not plugged in. It's pointed at my wall, and there's this silhouette. A tall, hooded figure, like a shadow being projected. But there's no film, no sound, nothing. Just that shape. I'm trying to scream, trying to move, and my body will not cooperate. Eventually, I manage to wrench myself awake fully, and when I sit up, everything's dark and still. The projector is off, just sitting there like it always was. I wrote it off as a nightmare. A really awful, super vivid nightmare. You know how you do that? You convince yourself, okay, weird, but whatever, brain stuff. But it didn't end there. For months after that, I was getting sleep paralysis almost every night. Sometimes I'd wake up and feel this crushing weight on my chest, like someone was sitting on me, pushing the air out of my lungs. I'd try to move my arms, my legs, even just my fingers, and nothing would respond. And almost every time, that same figure would be there. Sometimes it was in the projection, like before, this dark, hooded shape on the wall. Other times, it wasn't a projection at all. It felt like it was just standing in the room, closer than before. I never saw a face, just this sense that if I really looked, if I really focused, I'd see something I didn't want to see. And it wasn't just at night. I'd be at my desk doing homework and hear footsteps in the hallway when everyone else was asleep or downstairs. Slow, steady, deliberate steps, like someone taking their time. Then scratching. Little taps and scrapes at my door. I'd open it and nothing. Empty hallway. I kept telling myself I was stressed, that I was imagining things. My family didn't really take it seriously. My sister made jokes about me watching too many horror movies. My stepdad teased me about my haunted decor. Nobody was mean about it, but they definitely didn't get it. And when nobody believes you, you start doing that awful thing where you don't believe yourself either. I honestly thought I was losing my mind. And then the boy showed up. There's one episode I will never forget, and I'm sure it's burned into my brain until I die. I woke up again, paralyzed, stuck on my back, eyes open. The room's dark, but I can see enough. And in the corner, near my bookshelf, there's this small figure. A kid. A little boy. At first, he's just standing there, facing me. Then he starts walking. Slowly. One step at a time toward my bed. I shut my eyes as tight as I can. I'm thinking, nope, 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 not doing this. But you know when your curiosity overrides your fear? I don't even know how much time passed, but finally I forced my eyes open again. And he is right there, inches from my face. His skin is this chalky, unnatural white. His eyes are blood red, like there's no white in them at all. His teeth are sharp, too many of them, and there's this long, pointed tongue lolling out of his mouth. He's screaming and laughing at the same time, this horrible sound, like static mixed with a child's giggle. I couldn't move, couldn't scream back, couldn't do anything. I just lay there and took it in and honestly thought, this is it. I've snapped. I'm gone. When I finally jolt awake for real, I'm drenched in sweat. My voice is hoarse, like I'd been yelling, even though no one heard anything. I remember just sitting on the edge of my bed, shaking, thinking, something is really, really wrong here. By that point, I was terrified to sleep at all. I'd fall asleep at school in class. I'd drink way too much caffeine just to stay awake. My grades dropped. I was anxious all the time. It felt like my life had shrunk down to this cycle of dread. Get through the day, then survive the night. And then, finally, someone else felt it. One night, my mom, her name's Celia, ended up sleeping in my room after she and Leo had a fight. I wasn't home. I was sleeping over at a friend's place. The next morning when I got back, she looked off. Tired, pale, unsettled. She goes, "Something's wrong with your room." I just froze. She told me she'd heard footsteps in the hallway all night. She heard scratching on the door. She said she felt like she was being watched, like there was someone standing over her while she was trying to sleep. She had horrible nightmares. She used the exact word I'd been too scared to say out loud. Your room feels evil. And I can't even tell you the weird mix of emotions I had. On one hand, I was terrified. On the other, I finally felt this tiny flicker of validation. Like, okay, I'm not making this up. It's not just in my head. Something is seriously wrong here. After that, I went into full research mode. I spent weeks reading everything I could find online about sleep paralysis, hauntings, entities, energy, all of it. Forums, blogs, random posts from people I would have rolled my eyes at before all this started. The details they shared matched so closely with what I'd been going through that I felt physically sick reading it. The gradual escalation, the feeling of being watched, the sleep paralysis with recurring figures, the way the whole room felt contaminated. And suddenly it just clicked. Like this quiet little voice in the back of my head finally screamed loud enough to be heard. The projector. It sounds so obvious now, but at the time I'd been trying so hard to rationalize everything that I'd never really connected it. The timing was perfect though. Things started the exact night I brought that thing into my room. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense in the worst possible way. So the next day I didn't mess around. I grabbed the projector, the box of reels, didn't even bother to pack them neatly, and shoved everything into the trunk of my car. I didn't want them in the house for one more second. Instead of taking them to a thrift store or donating them, I drove them out of town. Like a solid couple of hours out, to this big landfill near the edge of the city. The whole drive I felt this crawling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone was sitting in the back seat, just staring at me. When I got there, I didn't say some ritual or blessing or anything. I'm not that dramatic. I just got out, hauled the projector and reels out of the trunk, and tossed them as far into the massive garbage piles as I could. I remember my hands shaking, my heart pounding. I wanted them gone. Not sitting in a box in my garage, not passed on to someone else. Just gone. I drove home with this weird mix of fear and relief, like I'd just done something really important, but also maybe really stupid. And then, everything stopped. I'm not exaggerating. That very night, my room felt different. Lighter. Like someone had opened a window in a stale, stuffy space. I slept through the night for the first time in months. No footsteps. No scratching at the door. No hooded figure. No demon child inches from my face. The sleep paralysis just vanished. Since then, I've had sleep paralysis maybe 2 or 3 times, and it's always been during really stressful periods. And even then, the hallucinations weren't anything like what I saw back then. No red-eyed boy, no projector imagery, nothing that felt targeted. I still think about those film reels sometimes. I wonder what was on them, who owned that projector before me, where it came from. There were labels, like I said, in that foreign script. A part of me was so curious. I almost set the projector up once, just to see what would flicker onto the wall. But every instinct in my body screamed, "Don't. Don't plug it in. Don't thread the film. Don't press play." I didn't even try to translate the writing on the reels. I just wanted that entire chapter erased from my space, from my house, from my life. And here's the thing. Before this, nothing particularly paranormal had ever happened to me. And since then, I've never experienced anything that intense again. The timing, the way it all lined up with that one object, it's really hard for me to dismiss as coincidence. So yeah, that's the story of the time I unknowingly brought home something that felt haunted, for lack of a better word, and how everything went to hell until I got rid of it. I still don't know exactly what it was. Was it just sleep paralysis and my brain making connections it wanted to make? Was there really something attached to that projector and those reels? I honestly don't know. But I do know this. My life went back to normal the moment that thing was out of my world. And I genuinely wonder, has anything like this ever happened to you? Like, have you ever brought an object into your home and felt the whole energy of the place shift in a bad way? So, let me tell you about something that happened a while back that I still think about all the time. This was back in 2013. I had this friend from the racing scene. Let's call him Dylan. We knew each other through BMX racing. We were friendly, hung out at the track, but it's not like we were pouring our hearts out to each other or anything. We didn't really know much about each other's childhoods or families, and we didn't share a ton of mutual friends outside that racing bubble. One evening, completely out of nowhere, my phone rings. It's Dylan. We hadn't talked in months, so I'm already a little surprised. I pick up and he goes, "Okay, this is going to sound really weird, but just hear me out." He tells me he has this coworker, let's call her Julia. And Julia had come up to him at work and asked, "Hey, who is this girl you know?" Now, my first name isn't very common, so he kind of froze and said, I do know why?" Julia explains that there's this woman who keeps approaching her, insisting she has a message for a girl with my name, and that Dylan knows her. Over and over, same thing. She has a message, you know her. Then he tells me that this woman claims to be a medium, that spirits talk to her. He's half laughing, half nervous, like, look, she might be legit, she might be totally off her Rockefeller, I don't know. But Julia says she really wants you to come by so she can pass this message along. He's weirded out because he swears he's never mentioned me to Julia. Not once. No reason to. Different parts of his life. Now here's the thing. I actually do believe in spirits and mediums. My sister is a medium, though at that point we were kind of estranged, not in regular contact. So I'm listening to all this like, okay, this is strange, but not completely out of my belief system. I tell him, yeah, okay, I'll meet her. Let's see what this lady has to say. The next day after work, Dylan picks me up. Julia lives about 25 minutes away from where I was staying at the time. He tells me he's been to her place a couple times for small get-togethers, but they're not super close, just work friends. We get there, and Julia seems totally normal. You know what I mean? She's married, has a couple of kids, maybe mid-40s. The house is cozy. There are toys shoved under the couch, family photos on the wall, just very regular, grounded energy. Not what you'd picture if you were expecting some kind of spooky movie scene. We do a little small talk in the kitchen, then she leads us into the living room. I sit down on the couch, Dylan sits off to the side, and I'm like, okay, so what's this all about? What does this lady want to tell me, and who is she? Julia takes a breath and starts explaining. She says there's this woman who's been coming to her, spiritually, not physically, and she keeps insisting Julia finds a girl with my name. Julia says this woman never had biological children of her own, but she helped raise a lot of kids and loved them like they were hers. And immediately, in my head, I go, oh my God, this sounds like my old daycare lady. Let's call her Maggie. Maggie helped raise me. I was in her care until I was about 10 years old. She watched a bunch of kids from the neighborhood, and she treated us like family. She was loud and warm and stubborn in the best way. I adored her. We stayed close even after I grew up. She ended up passing away from cancer a few years before this whole thing happened. I had actually visited her in hospice the day before she died. I ask, "Can you tell me what this woman looks like?" Julia pauses, kind of squints like she's focusing, and then says, "She's a bigger woman, and she has one green eye and one brown eye." And my brain just slams on the brakes, because Maggie had one green eye and one brown eye. That is such a specific, bizarre detail. It's not like saying she has brown hair and glasses. Heterochromia like that is rare, and for her to land on that with the right combination just floored me. Inside, I'm screaming, "That's Maggie. There's no way she just guessed that." But on the outside, I'm trying to stay neutral, just letting her talk. Julia goes on with more details. The way this woman laughs, how she's very protective, how she kind of collects kids emotionally and keeps track of them, how she hated being in hospitals and felt trapped there. Little things. And it's all lining up with Maggie so perfectly that I'm honestly a little freaked out. So finally I ask, "Do you know her name?" Julia gets quiet for a second, looks off like she's listening to something, and then she says, "Her name is Lorraine." And immediately I'm like, okay, you lost me. Because I'm thinking, nope, her name was Maggie. Definitely not Lorraine. So there's this little crash in my chest, like maybe this is where it falls apart. Maybe the eye thing was a wild coincidence. Still, I let Julia keep going. She tells me the message from this woman, Lorraine. It sounds kind of like what you'd expect. She wants me to know that she's okay, that she's happy, that she's around me a lot because I was very special to her. Julia says that if I feel like someone's with me, or I hear odd sounds when I'm alone, I shouldn't be scared. It's probably her checking in. We talk a bit more, nothing too dramatic. Eventually Dylan and I leave, and I go home. But my mind will not let this go. All night, and honestly the entire next day, I'm replaying every detail. The way Julia described her, the personality, the protectiveness, the eye colors. It all feels so spot on for Maggie that I can't just shrug it off. The only thing that doesn't fit is the name. Lorraine. It bugs me enough that I finally call my mom. I tell her the whole story, from Dylan's weird call, to going to Julia's house, to the description of this woman, to the eyes, all of it. And then I say, the only thing is, she told me the woman's name is Lorraine, and that's where it doesn't match. Because, you know, Maggie. And my mom just goes really, really quiet. Then she says, "You didn't know this, but Maggie's real first name was Lorraine. Margaret was her middle name. She just always went by Maggie because she liked it better." I remember just sitting there, holding the phone, staring at nothing. My whole body got that cold, buzzy feeling, because there was no way Julia could have known that. I didn't know that. I had never in my life heard anyone call Maggie Lorraine. In that moment, it felt like everything just clicked into place. The eyes, the way she was described, the love, the name. It was like Maggie had found a way to cut through all the noise just to say, one more time, "Hey, kiddo, I'm still here." And ever since then, whenever I hear some little unexplained sound in my apartment, or feel that sort of gentle, someone's here energy when I know the room is empty, I'll just smile and say out loud, almost casually, "Hi, Maggie. I know that's you." So, hey, my name's Maya, and I want to tell you about the first time I was actually of the things I feel and see. I've lived in the same neighborhood my whole life. Ever since I was little, I've been sensitive to energy, I guess. Spirits, vibes, whatever you want to call it. I pick up on stuff that most people don't notice. I see things sometimes, shadows, flashes, shapes, that other people just walk past. And honestly, it never really scared me before. It was just part of my life. Until that night. Our neighbor lives alone in the house right next to ours. I'll call him Mr. H. He's in his late 50s now. As far back as I can remember, he's been drunk almost every day. He can be rude, he can be aggressive, but a part of me has always felt bad for him. His wife left him years ago, when he was still pretty young, and his daughter moved out the moment she turned 18. He's pretty much been alone ever since. He doesn't get visitors. He doesn't do much. He just drinks and stays inside. And his house has always felt heavy, like the air around it is thicker than everywhere else on the street. When I was growing up, I'd sometimes see these little black shapes around his yard and near his windows. They'd move fast, like shadows that had slipped out of place. They were too solid to be just tricks of the light, but not solid enough to be normal. I'd blink, and they'd be gone. I didn't say much about it because I've always seen things. I just figured it was more of the same. Spirits passing through or attached to him somehow. But after that night, I don't think those were spirits at all. I think they were something else. This all happened on a weeknight. My family and I were about to leave for a church activity, kind of a youth group thing. It was just starting to get dark outside. Right before we got into the car, we suddenly heard this horrible noise. It was his truck alarm, blaring over and over again. At first, we just kind of rolled our eyes. We figured he'd hit the button by accident or stumbled into it while he was drunk. He didn't come outside to turn it off, and that wasn't surprising. But later, my younger brother Eli told us that right before we left, he thought he heard something. He said he heard Mr. H say, "Help." Not yelled, just this low, mumbled help, like it barely made it out of his mouth. Eli thought he was just imagining it, or that our neighbor was just drunk talking to himself again, so he didn't say anything in the moment. Now, looking back, that detail eats at me. We left for church anyway. The whole thing lasted maybe an hour and a half. When we came back, it was fully dark outside, and his truck alarm was still going off. That's the first thing that felt wrong. Our street is usually really quiet at night, but that night, it didn't just feel quiet, it felt emptied. Like even the usual night sounds were avoiding that side of the street. My mom parked the car, turned the engine off, and just sat there for a second, listening. Then she looked at us, me, Eli, and my sister Jenna, and said, "Maybe we should go check on him, just in case he fell or something." So we agreed. We all grabbed our phones and turned the flashlights on. As we started walking toward his house, it felt off. You know that feeling when your stomach drops before anything actually happens? It was like that, but spread through my whole chest. The only sound was the alarm. No crickets, no cars passing by, just this shrieking, repetitive wail and our footsteps on the pavement. Eli walked ahead of us, aiming his flashlight at the truck. He suddenly stopped and said, there's something in there." We all slowed down, and then we heard it. From the direction of the truck, or maybe from behind it, in the shadows near the side of the house, came this deep, rough growl. It wasn't loud, but it was thick. It felt like it vibrated under my skin more than in my ears. It didn't sound like a dog. It didn't sound like a coyote. I've heard plenty of those. It didn't sound like a person trying to growl either. It sounded like something that wasn't supposed to exist. The second that sound hit me, my ears started ringing so hard it almost hurt. My chest tightened, like someone had wrapped a band around it. I felt this wave of darkness, heavy, choking darkness, roll over me. I actually felt nauseous, and everything around his house started to look tinted. The best way I can describe it is like there was a reddish haze around it. Not bright, more like an aura, or like I was seeing the air itself glowing at the edges of my vision. I know how that sounds, but that's what I saw. I felt surrounded by something evil. Not just bad vibes, but something that knew we were there. My mom heard the growl too. She doesn't pick up on stuff the way I do, but I saw her freeze. She tried to act calm for us, but her hand was shaking so much that the light from her phone was jittering across the driveway. She just said, very quietly, "Okay, we're going back. Now." No one argued. We turned around, walked, almost ran back to our house, and shut the door. I could barely talk. I couldn't even really explain what I felt. I just knew that sound was not from this world. I live near open land. I've heard coyotes yipping, dogs fighting, cats screaming, goats, owls, so many weird animal sounds. This wasn't any of those. This was something else. Once we got inside, we all started talking over each other, trying to make sense of it. My mom was still shaking. I could see her trying to find some logical explanation, trying to tell herself it was just some animal. But her eyes said she didn't believe that. We decided to check on our neighbor without going back over there ourselves. So my mom texted one of our other neighbors, an older lady across the street. I'll call her Miss Carol. She's very Christian and always tries to help everyone out. We asked if she had Mr. H's phone number. She didn't, but she immediately said, "I'll go over there and check on him." We told her no. We said, "Please don't go over there. Something's not right. Maybe we should just call the police to do a welfare check." She hesitated, but she could hear how serious we were. She agreed and said she'd phone the police. A little while later, we stepped outside to wait and watch for them. While we were standing there, I started talking to Miss Carol more about it. I kind of nervously said, "His house always feels weird to me." She looked at me for a second and then said, "You feel things too, don't you?" I remember just staring at her. She told me that ever since she was a kid, she's been able to sense things, exactly the way I do. She said she's always felt something dark about his house, that every time she walks past it, it feels cold, like the warmth gets sucked out of her. Hearing her say that made my stomach drop. It was like confirmation that I wasn't just being dramatic or imagining things. Soon, the police arrived. We stood in our yard, not too close, just watching. They went up to his door. After a minute, Mr. H came outside. He looked confused and kind of dazed, not super wasted, but not totally clear either. They talked to him for a bit. I couldn't hear what they were saying. Eventually, he told them he had accidentally set off his truck alarm and forgot to turn it off. But as he turned to go back up the steps to his porch, he suddenly fell. He wasn't badly hurt, but it was enough for them to stay longer, ask more questions, make sure he was okay. To a random person, it probably just looked like an old guy who'd been drinking and took a clumsy fall. But to me, with everything that had just happened, Eli hearing help, the alarm, the growl, that red haze, it felt like too much of a coincidence. Later that night, after the police left and the street went quiet again, I just sat on my bed, replaying everything. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that growl again. I felt that tightness in my chest again. I've been scared before, sure, but this was different. This was a deep, bone-level fear that came from knowing something was there. Something bad. I don't know what it was. Maybe some people would say it was just an animal, or the wind, or our imaginations. But I know what I heard. I know what I felt. I know what I saw around that house. Part of me thinks it was something like a skinwalker. Part of me thinks it was something demonic. I don't expect everyone to believe in those things, but I do. Because when that thing growled, it felt like it saw me, like it knew I could feel it. Since that night, walking past that house feels completely different. The heaviness is worse. Sometimes I swear the air gets colder just crossing in front of his yard. I don't look at his windows anymore if I can help it. I don't know exactly what's in that house. I don't know why it finally showed itself that night after being quiet for so long. But I know something dark is attached to that place, to that man, or both. And if there's anything I want you to take from this, it's this. If you ever feel that kind of wrongness, deep in your gut, trust it. Don't brush it off because you're afraid of sounding crazy. Don't talk yourself out of it to make other people comfortable. Call someone. Get help. Step away. Because there are things in this world that we don't understand. And once you hear something like that, once you feel it, you don't ever forget. Okay, so let me just talk to you like we're sitting at my kitchen table for a minute, because this whole thing still makes me feel a little crazy. My name's Karen, and my husband Mark and I are in our late 40s. Our son Eli is 22. This involves all three of us. We've lived in the same small town in Ohio since 1998, and we've used the same exact bank the whole time. Riverside Credit Union. You know the kind. Little brick building, one inside office, a couple of drive-through lanes. Every Friday, like clockwork, we hit the drive-through ATM on our way back home. And when you pull out from the drive-through, you turn right to get back to our house. We've done this for decades. Now let me describe my husband for a second because it matters. Mark is an engineer, writes software, absolutely loves spreadsheets, charts, graphs. If it's got data, he's happy. He is not a signs and wonders kind of person. He doesn't talk about vibes or gut feelings or any of that. He's very no-nonsense, very logical, and honestly, he would never bring up something weird unless it really bothered him. So a few months ago, he comes home from the bank, and I can tell by his face something's off. He says very carefully, like he's testing each word before it leaves his mouth, "You know Riverside Credit Union? Something strange just happened there, and I can't explain it." I'm thinking, okay, did the ATM eat his card? Did someone yell at him? What? He goes, "There's this giant tree at the edge of the parking lot now. Like a huge tree. So big I don't ever remember seeing it before. You know how we always look to the left for cars before we turn right toward home? Well, now there's this big, fully grown tree there, and I had to lean forward to see around it to pull out." And I just stare at him, because I love landscaping. I notice every bush, every flower bed, every weed that doesn't belong. If anybody would have seen a tree appear out of nowhere, it would be me. And I know there's no tree there. I would have noticed. We go there every week because we still use a cash envelope system for our budget. Every Friday, same routine. We pull up to the ATM, get our cash for groceries and gas, and head home. We are creatures of habit. So now we're both standing there in the kitchen, going back and forth, trying to reason this out. Maybe they redid the landscaping. Maybe they brought in a big mature tree with a truck and planted it recently. But Mark says, "No, that's the thing. Nothing else looks new. No fresh mulch, no new plants. Everything looks old and settled. Just this tree." He's looking genuinely rattled. Like, is something wrong with my brain rattled? He actually mentions that. He's worried about early dementia or something. And I'm thinking, oh great, now I'm scared for him and confused about a phantom tree. So we decide, okay, we're not going to sit here and obsess about it. We'll just go look. We get in the car and drive over to the bank. And I'm telling you, the second we pull into that lot, I get this weird feeling in my chest. Like I'm walking into a place I know too well, and something is off, but I can't name it yet. We pull through the ATM lane like we always do. He gets his cash, we loop back around, and there it is. A big, mature maple tree, right on the left side as you're trying to pull out. Old enough that the trunk is thick and the branches are way up high, like it's been there for years. It's placed in exactly the spot where, if you're the driver, you have to lean forward and look around it to check for oncoming cars. Mark and I just sit there in the car in silence for a second. Both of us leaning forward, looking around this tree like, have we always done this? And we both know the answer. No, we have never had to lean like that. Not once in all these years. And I can feel this kind of, creeping uneasiness. Like, what do you do when your memory and your eyes are disagreeing? Part of me wants to march right into the bank and ask, hey, when did you guys put that tree in? But another part of me thinks, they're going to look at us like we're nuts. What if they say, oh, that tree's been there since 2010? Then what? Now it's not just the tree that's the problem, it's our sanity. So we don't ask. We drive home. But it bothers us enough that we decide to bring our son into it. Now, Eli has grown up riding in the back of that same car, on that same route, to that same bank. Week after week, year after year. If anyone else would have seen changes, it's him. We don't give him any backstory. We just casually ask, hey Eli, you know Riverside Credit Union? When you pull out of the ATM lane, is there a big tree on the left you have to look around? He answers instantly. No hesitation. No, there's no tree there. It's open. You can see the road. And Mark and I just look at each other. So then we tell him the whole thing. The way Mark saw the tree, how we drove over and confirmed it, how it looks like it's always been there. Eli laughs like, okay, now I have to see this for myself. So we all pile into the car. Now it's this weird little family field trip to stare at a tree. We get to the bank. Same drive-through, same loop around. And we all see it at once. The tree. This big, settled, not new tree, sitting there like it's part of the original design. Eli goes quiet. And then he says, very slowly, I don't remember this at all. He leans forward in the passenger seat the same way Mark does when he's driving, testing the angle, like he's trying to trigger a memory. But nothing. For all three of us, there has never been leaning forward to see around a tree as part of this route. And yet, there we are, doing exactly that. We sit in the car for a bit, all three of us looking at this tree and not saying much. Because honestly, what do you say? It feels almost embarrassing to admit. We are three fairly intelligent people, with a routine that hasn't changed in years, and we're all convinced that a fully grown tree just wasn't there before. We still haven't gone inside to ask the bank staff about it. Part of me really wants to. Another part of me pictures some teller saying, oh yeah, that tree's been there since before I started working here. And then we have to smile and nod and pretend we're not quietly panicking. So that's where we are. Three people, same routine for years. All three of us share this very strong, very specific knowing that there was never a tree there. Not a sapling, not a medium-sized one, nothing. Just open space. And now there's a big old tree that looks like it's always been part of the landscaping. And I don't know what to do with that. I don't know if it's a collective blind spot, some weird glitch in how memory works, or something else entirely. All I know is that every time we pull out of that parking lot now, and I lean forward to look around that trunk, I get a little shiver, because my body is doing something my memory insists I've never had to do before. So, that's our story. The tree that appeared out of nowhere. So, I wanted to tell you about this because it's been sitting with me all day, and honestly, I don't really know what to make of it. When I was a kid, we used to spend long weekends at my grandparents' house. It was one of those old family homes where the doors were always open and relatives just came and went. My dad's cousins were always around back then. There were so many of them that I could barely keep track. There was this one cousin in particular. His name was Daniel. He was maybe 8 or 9 years older than me. Not that much older, but old enough that I thought he was, I don't know, cool. He was kind, had this easy smile, and he never made me feel like just a kid. I think he was probably my first real crush, even though at the time I wouldn't have called it that. It was more like admiration from afar, you know? As the years went on, we stopped going to my grandparents' place as often. People moved, got busy, built their own lives. The house didn't fill up the way it used to, and slowly, everyone just drifted. Fast forward maybe 20 years. I was already married by then, with a little boy, and we were doing something very ordinary, grocery shopping at this big supermarket in the mall. And there he was, Daniel. I almost walked past him because it took a moment for my brain to match his face to the boy I remembered. We chatted for a few minutes, just the usual small talk, work, life. Wow, it's been so long. He hadn't married, but he mentioned he had a girlfriend. I remember thinking, of course he does, and then we both had to go our separate ways. It felt strangely casual for someone who had once seemed so important in my little childhood world. A little while after that, there was a family gathering, a cousin's birthday, I think, and he was there too. We didn't really talk much that time. I was busy keeping an eye on my son, and my husband, Marco, was chatting with my uncles. Daniel and I just exchanged a few smiles across the room. That was it. Nothing dramatic, nothing romantic, just life happening around us. Then the pandemic came. That's when everything changed. Daniel got sick. First it was just COVID, and then suddenly it wasn't just anything. He ended up in the hospital, in the ICU, and because of all the restrictions, no one from the family was allowed to really be with him. We got updates through messages and calls, and then one day the update was that he was gone. I remember feeling sad, of course, but also guilty for not having known him better as an adult. He was part of my childhood, and then he just became one of those relatives you think you'll see one of these days at another event. And then there are no more events. For a long time, that was it. Just a quiet sadness in the background. Then, sometime early in 2024, I can't remember the exact month, I started dreaming about him. What's strange is that I never dreamt about him when he was alive, not once. But suddenly, there he was in my dreams, as if it was totally normal. In one of the first dreams, he was standing a little distance away from me, in this place that looked like a bus terminal or maybe an old train station. Lots of people, lots of movement, but everything felt oddly muted, like the sound was turned down. He looked just like he did the last time I saw him at the supermarket. A little older, a little tired around the eyes, but still very much Daniel. He looked at me and said, very simply, "Come with me." Not in a scary way, not like a horror movie. It was calm, almost gentle, but the words shook me. I remember feeling torn, like part of me wanted to walk toward him, and another part of me was rooted in place. I never actually moved in the dream. I just stood there, frozen, while he waited. I thought that made sense. And then, life being what it is, I never actually did it. I kept telling myself I would when I had time, and of course, that time just never came. But the dreams didn't stop. I dreamt of him a few more times, though not always as clearly. Sometimes he would be in the background of whatever dream I was having, just there, watching quietly. He didn't ask me to go with him anymore. No words, just his presence, like he was sitting at the edge of the scene, waiting for something. And then there was last night. Last night's dream was so vivid that when I woke up, I had to actually check the room to remind myself where I was. In the dream, we were at a family gathering again. It looked like one of those rented function rooms. Round tables, tablecloths, kids running around, the usual noise of relatives catching up. My husband, Marco, was seated at another table, laughing with some of my cousins. I was at a different table, and Daniel was sitting right beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his arm. Nobody seemed surprised that he was there. It was like he'd never died at all. What's strange is that there were no words the entire time. None. People were talking around us, but he and I didn't speak. At one point, I felt his hand move, and he gently slipped his fingers between mine, like we were holding hands under the table. It wasn't romantic in an obvious way. It was intimate, yes, but also very quiet, familiar, like we'd been doing that our whole lives. We just sat there like that. No talking, no dramatic music, nothing. Just the feeling of his hand holding mine. And I remember knowing, in the dream, that Marco was just a few meters away at the other table. That made it feel even stranger, like I was doing something wrong, and yet, at the same time, it didn't feel wrong. It just felt inevitable. Eventually, the gathering started winding down, and it was time to go home. I let go of his hand and got up to leave with my husband. As we were walking toward the exit, I heard a woman behind me say something about Daniel. Something like, "It's still so sad what happened to him." And in that moment, inside the dream, I suddenly remembered. Oh, he's dead. It was like two realities colliding. The version where he was alive, sitting beside me, holding my hand, and the version where he wasn't here anymore at all. And then I woke up. All morning, I kept thinking about it. I don't know why I dream of him every now and then. I'm not secretly in love with him. I have my own life, my own family. But sometimes, especially after dreams like last night, I get this strange, quiet feeling in my chest. Like maybe, in some other lifetime or some other version of reality, he and I were meant to be something more. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, is he my soulmate? And then I immediately feel guilty, because what does that even mean when I'm married and I love my husband? It makes no sense, but the feeling is there, stubborn and soft at the same time. I don't have any answers. I don't know if it's just my mind processing childhood memories, or unfinished feelings, or grief that I never really acknowledged. I don't know if it's something spiritual, or if it's just the brain doing what brains do at night. All I know is that every so often, he shows up in my dreams as if he never left. And for a little while, it feels like we're still connected somehow. And I guess that's why I'm sharing this with you now, because part of me is wondering, has anything like this ever happened to you? Okay, so let me just start from the beginning. I moved into this house at the start of September, and ever since then, little things have been happening that I can't quite explain. It's me, my husband Daniel, and our 2 dogs, a tiny terrier mix named Pip, and a big goofy shepherd mix named Rhea. They're both super friendly, not the kind of dogs that growl at corners or anything like that. We're the first owners. We actually built this place. We subcontracted some of the work, but me and Daniel did all the framing ourselves. I work from home and I'm doing online classes, so I'm here basically all the time. Daniel works rotating shifts, but lately he's on mostly nights. So a lot of evenings, it's just me and the dogs. The first weird things were small, easy to brush off. I kept finding doors unlocked. Now, just so you understand, I'm that person who automatically locks the door behind me. I've accidentally locked friends out more than once. I don't leave doors unlocked. It's just not something I do. But I'd come into the kitchen and the back door would be unlocked, or the side door to the garage. At first, I told myself I must be stressed or distracted, because you know how it is. New house, new routine, a lot on my mind. Then I started noticing the closet doors. I'd wake up or walk into a room and find them cracked open or fully open when I know I closed them. I thought, okay, maybe the hinges are weird, or maybe the house is still settling, or the doors weren't installed perfectly. So I brushed it off. I kept telling myself, it's fine, new house quirks, no big deal. Then one afternoon, something happened that I couldn't rationalize away. I was standing at the kitchen window, and I saw my neighbor's little girl, her name's Lily, in their backyard. She suddenly pointed at our house, kind of wide-eyed. So of course I looked to see what she's pointing at, and I see a man. He's walking along the outside of my backyard fence, right near the corner. Just this quick glimpse of him as he turns the corner and disappears behind the house. I only saw part of his face, but my brain did that immediate alarm thing like, who is that? I grabbed my phone and called Daniel right away. I told him, there's somebody in the backyard, you need to check. He was already almost home from running an errand, so he pulled up and went straight around the house. It took him maybe 2 minutes to get to the backyard. Nobody. No one in our yard, no one on the street, no one walking away. We checked both sides of the house. We looked down the road. Nothing. It was like the man had just vanished. And that was the first time I remember thinking, okay, this isn't just me being forgetful. Then there was the night that really got to me. It was late, maybe 11:30 p.m. Daniel was at work on night shift. I was doing that thing where you get a sudden burst of energy and decide it's the perfect time to clean the house. The layout is pretty open, so from the living room you can see straight to the front door. Pip and Rio were lying in the living room, half asleep, while I was picking up and wiping things down. All of a sudden, the front door handle rattled. Not like the house settling, not like a random creak. It sounded exactly like someone on the other side trying the handle. Both dogs shot up and started barking like crazy, staring right at the door. My first thought was, oh, Daniel must be home early. Maybe he forgot his key or just startled the dogs. No one. No car in the driveway except ours. No movement on the porch. Just the quiet front yard. That's when the feeling hit me. That sort of cold, hollow nervousness. I remember thinking, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe the latch shifted and it only sounded like rattling. I decided to settle the dogs down and put them in our bedroom so they'd relax. I turned to head that way, and as I walked past the kitchen toward the laundry room that leads to the garage, something caught my eye. The door to the garage was standing wide open. Now, I am obsessive about that door. It's one of the main things I check at night because the garage leads straight outside. I know I had locked it and shut it earlier. I just stopped and stared at it for a second because my brain couldn't immediately file it under normal thing. I did not hear it open. The dogs did not react to that door at all. But there it was, open. I shut it, locked it, and at that point, I was done. I grabbed both dogs, went to the bedroom, and basically made a mini security routine. I checked every door and window, then checked them again. Then I locked the bedroom door and piled some stuff in front of it, just for my own peace of mind. I texted Daniel what had happened, and when he got home in the morning, he woke me up and said, kind of carefully, "Hey, did you leave the back door unlocked again?" I told him no, absolutely not. He said, "Well, when I came in, the back door and the garage door were both unlocked. I had personally checked those doors before I went to bed." That wasn't the end of it. A little while later, we left the house for a bit, just a quick trip out, not long enough to kennel the dogs. Pip is tiny and pretty chill when we're gone, so we always let her roam the house. When we came back, Rhea greeted us at the door like usual, but Pip was nowhere. We called her. Nothing. We finally heard this little scratch whine from one of the spare Endeavors. The door was shut. We opened it and there she was, looking totally confused but not scared, like she'd just been waiting for us. We don't shut that door. There's no reason to. And Pip can't pull a door shut behind her. She's too small. That same week, there was another incident. I'd let both dogs out into the backyard and gone back to the kitchen to rinse some dishes. A few minutes later, I heard their tags jingling behind me. I turned around and they were just trotting into the kitchen from the hallway, tails wagging. They had somehow gotten back inside. When I went to check, the sliding door to the yard was closed, latched. It's a little heavy. You really have to pull it. The only explanation I could come up with was that I must have absent-mindedly let them in and forgotten, but that doesn't line up with what I was doing in that moment. I was at the SIG the whole time. And then there's that same door to the garage. One afternoon, I was literally standing in the kitchen, scrolling on my phone, both dogs lying on the floor. I looked up, and the door to the laundry room that leads to the garage, which had been closed, was now open. It was in my line of sight. I never saw or heard it move. I know how it sounds. Believe me, I've run through every logical explanation I can. Just to clear up some of the obvious questions people ask, there is no one living in the house with us. I am as sure of that as a person can be. The attic access can't be opened and closed easily from inside the attic. You need a ladder and someone outside to do it. So that whole person living in the attic theory doesn't fit here. I also installed all the door locks myself. I know exactly how many keys came with each lock. We did have a key in a lockbox for subcontractors, but that key has never gone missing. It stays in the box unless someone is using it, and it doesn't leave the property. Part of the reason I'm so particular about security is because, when I was in college, I was stalked by a classmate. Let's call him Evan. He got caught more than once hiding outside buildings, watching me, and looking through my apartment windows. It only stopped when the school got involved and campus security stepped in. So when we chose to build this house, I picked the layout specifically so there'd be no easy hiding places and clear visibility around the exterior. This house was supposed to feel safe. So, that's where I'm at. Doors unlocking themselves. A man in the backyard who disappears in under 2 minutes. Handles rattling when no one's there. The dogs ending up in rooms they couldn't have shut themselves in, or somehow appearing inside when I'm sure I left them out. I'm not jumping straight to ghosts or anything like that, but I also don't have a neat explanation. I've decided I'm going to change out all the locks and put in a proper camera system. Front door, back door, garage, maybe even some inside, just pointed at the main entrances. If it's some kind of wiring issue or a problem with the doors, I'll see it. If it's someone, I'll see that too. Until then, I keep doing the same thing every night, walking the house, checking every door, every window, and trying to convince myself that I'm overreacting. But deep down, there's this little feeling I can't quite shake, that something here is just off. So, this all started a long time ago. I couldn't tell you the exact year, but I know I was a kid, maybe 9 years old. It was during that phase where I'd sometimes share a mattress with my older brother Leo on especially cold nights. Our house wasn't great with electricity. We only had one small space heater, and if you plugged in too many things at once, the power in that room would just cut out. So most of the time, we just bundled up together under a bunch of blankets and called it good. Anyway, this one night, I'm sleeping like usual. Nothing weird, no nightmare, no loud noise. And then I just wake up. My eyes open and I'm staring at the ceiling. I remember thinking how strange it was because I've always been the type to sleep through anything unless I really had to use the bathroom, and I didn't. I'm lying there, half awake, trying to drift back off when I hear something. At first, it's just a sound, so soft I can't even tell what it is. I ignore it. I'm tired, I'm warm, Leo's snoring beside me, and I'm not exactly looking for reasons to stay awake. But then I hear it again. Same sound, same rhythm. And this time I kind of tune in, like, what is that? And then it clicks. It's my name. Very faint, like someone's trying not to be heard, but still clear enough that my brain goes, oh, that's definitely me they're calling. At first, I assume it's Leo messing with me. The voice does sound a little more feminine, but in my half-asleep logic, I decide he's just whispering weird to freak me out. The bedroom door is slightly open, and my parents always left the hallway light on back then so we wouldn't get scared of the dark. Because of that light, I can see Leo's face pretty clearly. So I turn my head toward him and just wait. And then I hear my name again, but his mouth doesn't move. He's completely still, breathing slow, dead asleep. That's when the fear really hits me. You know that cold feeling that crawls up your spine? It was like that. The voice wasn't loud, but it was too distinct, too intentional for me to write it off as the wind, or the TV in the living room, or anything normal like that. Someone was calling me, softly, patiently. And suddenly the idea of stepping off that mattress felt impossible. It wasn't even a real bed, just a mattress on the floor, no space underneath, nothing to hide in. Logically, there was nothing to be scared of, but I was completely frozen. I kept thinking, there's someone in the hallway, or just outside the door, and if I get up, something bad is going to happen. And that thought, it just rooted me there. Instead of getting up, I scooted closer to Leo until my back was pressed against his. I remember trying to take comfort in his warmth, in his breathing. Like if something came into the room, it would have to get through him first. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I almost relaxed, I'd hear it again. My name, whispered, over and over. Eventually, I started to cry. Not loud sobbing, more like this quiet, shaky, kid trying not to make noise kind of crying. I wasn't religious, not really. We'd say quick prayers sometimes, but I never remembered them word for word. That night, though, out of nowhere, I remembered the Our Father prayer perfectly, every line. So I started saying it, over and over, whispering it into my pillow while tears soaked the pillowcase. I was begging for it to stop, begging for morning to come. I just kept praying and listening to that hallway and refusing, absolutely refusing, to step off the mattress. But after that, I spent a lot more nights in Leo's bed over the years. I never heard that voice again. Not like that. No one whispering my name from the hallway. No mysterious calling. Just normal nights. Until we both got older and eventually moved into our own rooms. Fast forward to now. I'm an adult. I moved back into my parents' house recently to sort some things out in my life. Money, work, just everything. The room I used to sleep in with Leo, it's not a bedroom anymore. My parents turned it into a storage room. There are boxes stacked up, old furniture, random stuff nobody knows what to do with. None of my siblings live there anymore. We've all moved out. But here's the thing. Every time I walk past that old room, the door is slightly open. Always. Morning, afternoon, middle of the night, doesn't matter. It's never wide open, never fully closed, just halfway, like someone pushed it gently and let it swing. And it really gets to me. I can feel my chest tighten every time I walk by. I won't go in alone. If Mom needs something from there, I'll go with her. But I will not walk into that room by myself. It sounds ridiculous even as I say it, but that's where I'm at. I've tried closing the door. A lot. I'll pull it shut when I pass by in the afternoon. I'll make a point of it. I'll think, there, done. It's closed. But the next time I walk past, even just an hour later, it's open again. Same small gap, same angle. Now, I'm not ignoring the obvious explanations. My parents go in and out of that room all the time. They might just not close it all the way. They have a dog now too, Luna, and she likes nudging doors open with her nose. And the door itself is kind of broken. The latch doesn't really catch anymore, so if you push it, it just swings. Logically, I know all that. But emotionally, it still bothers me. Because every time I see that door slightly open, my brain doesn't think dog, or draft, or dad looking for something in a box. It jumps straight back to that night. Me lying on a mattress with my brother, the hallway light spilling in, someone whispering my name from outside the door, and me too scared to put my feet on the floor. And I start to wonder, is it just a memory my mind is obsessed with? Is it just anxiety attaching itself to something familiar? Or is there something more to it? Something I can't explain? I honestly don't know. What I do know is that the longer I'm back here, walking past that same doorway, seeing that same little crack of darkness or light between the frame and the door, the more unbalanced I feel about it. Like this one night from my childhood has stretched itself out into the present and refuses to stay where it belongs, in the past. Maybe there's a perfectly normal explanation. Maybe it's just my parents, or Luna, or a crooked door that won't stay shut. But if I'm being completely honest, every time I see it open again, a little voice in the back of my mind is still whispering my name.